Chapter 499. The gray-haired man piously walked to the side of the golden datura flower and knelt on both knees. The flickering light in his gray eyes disappeared, leaving behind only a pious look. Tower Cannon, Tower of War, Team Ash of the Bloodshed Land Division. Hunter Ash bids farewell to Lord 7th Page War. I am willing to offer the lowly life of hunting ashes for your orders. At this point, the gray-haired man lowered his head and gently knocked his head in front of the blooming golden datura flower. Then, the gray-haired man stretched out his hand and plucked the blooming golden datura flower from the ground under his feet. She carefully held the golden datura flower that was still dazzling even after leaving the ground. He then tossed the golden datura flower into the Class 3-dimensional rift that was in the process of evolving. Under the energy of the dimensional hub, the golden datura flower was slowly withering. However, the withering golden datura flower released a majestic energy. This boundless energy instantly increased the spatial energy of the dimensional hub by more than one level. The dimensional rift, which was already in the process of evolving, was torn open and expanded by more than 3 times. 4 source-type items immediately descended from the dimensional rift that had been split open. However, the withering golden datura flower instantly released more energy when the core of the flower withered. The Water World Dimensional Rift, which had just been promoted to Class 4, immediately began to evolve toward Class 5. At this time, the gray-haired man saw the tall man with dark green hair who had been sent to do the job earlier walking towards him with nearly 50 people. When the gray-haired man saw everyone walking over, he took out a palm-sized golden disc engraved with complex spatial patterns. The disc moved, and a huge purplish-gray egg appeared in the gray-haired man's hand. Everyone stood behind the tall man with a worried expression on their faces. However, the tall man's face was ashen, and his eyes seemed to have lost all signs of life. It was as if he already knew what was about to happen. Among the crowd, a dark-skinned man stepped forward and asked the gray-haired man, "Lord Hunting Ashes, if someone discovers that someone has been sucked into the dimensional rift, it might not necessarily be an unresolvable situation. But you upgraded the dimensional rift. Isn't this the same as locking the dimensional rift? This way with..." Before the dark-skinned man finished speaking, the gray-haired man raised his head and looked at the dark-skinned man with his gray eyes. The dark-skinned man felt his heart tighten. It was as if his heart was covered with a layer of dust. He felt an indescribable pressure. At this moment, the dark-skinned man heard the gray-haired man ask, "Where else do you want to go if you don't seal this place?" When the dark-skinned man heard this, an unnatural expression flashed across his face. His gaze towards the gray-haired man was far less submissive than the tall man from before. "Of course we are here to complete the mission that Lord Chanter Raven assigned us." When the gray-haired man heard the name Chanter Crow, a trace of disgust flashed across his face. "Crow asked you to maintain the normal operation of the dimensional rift and the concealment of the dimensional rift outside. Have you done it? Now that someone has broken in, you will naturally have to bear the responsibility of guarding this place." As soon as the gray-haired man finished speaking, a dark green-haired woman frowned. Her tone wasn't respectful at all and seemed to be questioning him instead. "Lord Hunting Ashes, the phase that we have contracted are in charge of maintaining the normal operation of the dimensional rift. We aren't adept at combat. We are afraid that something will go wrong and we won't be able to answer to Lord Crow. I wonder where the 3 king-class lords under Lord Crow are now. We need them to stabilize the situation at this time. With the 3 king-class lords around, they are much more useful than us." The dark green-haired woman changed the topic, and her tone was filled with obvious anger. "Lord Hunting Ashes, the 30 companions that you have sent out are usually cleaning up. Sending them out to deal with the enemy is just sending them to their deaths. If you do this, who will be responsible for cleaning up here?" The gray-haired man looked at everyone's expression. He then turned to look at the tall man with a faint smile and said, "It must be hard on you to work for me normally. It must have been hard on you to work for me. I didn't know that I had lost so much prestige here. If Chanter Crow was still alive, would he dare to speak to me like this right now?" When the tall man heard the gray-haired man's words, especially when he saw the expression on the gray-haired man's face, He felt as though his soul was about to come out of his body. Lord Crow might be a pinnacle suzerain/myth 2 Fae. However, in the Tower of War he was just a chanter. Lord Hunting Ashes might not be strong, but he belonged to a designated team under the Bloodshed Division. The Ashes team's status in the Tower of War was much higher than that of a chanter. They were even comparable to a lead reader. Every member of the Ash Squad had a tumor Fae that could trigger a disaster that Lord 7th Page War had personally stabbed into them. Every Ash team's Lord Hunting Ashes had a destructive strategic significance in a specific battle. However, Lord Hunting Ashes had been too low profile ever since he had arrived here. He had been guarding the dimensional hub. Fortunately, these people didn't know that Lord Crow was already dead. Otherwise, he might not have been able to summon these people even if he used Lord Hunting Ash's name. The tall man was about to say something to control the situation. Suddenly, he felt a pain in his abdomen as though a knife was being twisted, causing him to fall to the ground. At the same time, the tall man's contracted Fae was summoned out uncontrollably. Furthermore, after the tall man's contracted Fae was summoned out, it was as though his spirit had been severely tortured. The tall man closed his eyes in resignation. What was supposed to happen had finally happened. At the same time, the other 50 people who had followed the tall man here were also in the same situation. At that moment, Hunting Ashes was injecting his spiritual power into the purplish-gray egg in his hand. The purplish-gray egg instantly hatched into an elegant, slender, and purplish-gray poisonous wasp. Once this poisonous wasp appeared, it flew in front of each of the spirit chi professionals that had collapsed on the ground under the gray-haired man's command. The wasp's stinger instantly pierced into the back of everyone's head. It was as though something strange had been released from the back of everyone's head. The wasp's stinger instantly pierced into the back of everyone's head. It was as though something strange had been released from the back of everyone's head. First update, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 500. Every spirit chi professional that had been released by the purplish-gray elegant venomous wasp became abnormally dull and calm. However, the spirit chi professionals' contracted phase seemed to be enduring some kind of severe mental torture. They began to twitch and struggle violently. Immediately after, the purplish-gray venomous wasp began to stab its stinger into the eyes of every Fae present. Including the tall man, a total of 51 spirit chi professionals and 72 Faes stopped breathing at this moment. Immediately after, a bone-chilling chewing sound came from within these Faes' bodies. Inside each Fae's body, there was a worm of varying sizes that looked as though its entire body was pierced with blades. These worms rapidly gnawed at the Faes that were used as their medium, and their bodies began to grow rapidly. Close to 25 worms' bodies expanded to over 5 meters in size. The blades that grew all over their bodies were abnormally sharp. The remaining 47 had grown to over 3 meters in size. Their bodies were also covered with blades, just like the worms that had grown to over 5 meters in size. However, the sharpness of the blades of these 47 3-meter-long worms was obviously lower than that of the 25 5-meter-long worms. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, everything that was originally present had been nibbled away, leaving only the gray-haired man and the 72 giant worms with sharp horns all over their bodies. The gray-haired man reached out his hand, and the purplish-gray elegant venomous wasp, which was only the size of a goose egg, landed in his hand. It was using its mouth to clean the stinger at the back of its tail. The gray-haired man seemed to be talking to himself. The blade queen bees produced a batch of eggs, but they only have this kind of material. What a waste! However, the combat power of these blade worms is much stronger than that motley crew from before. These 25 diamond blade worms and 47 platinum blade worms should be enough to complete Lord 7th Page War's decree. With that said, the gray-haired man waved his hand and sent out all the blade worms. He then turned and walked to a distant stronghold. There were 7 giant Faes that had died long ago in this stronghold. These 7 massive Faes, which had long been dead, had obviously been preserved very well. They were a little shriveled, but they had not rotted. The gray-haired man spoke softly to the blade queen bee in his palm. "Go and eat these 7 Faes." The Blade Queen Bee was clearly resisting, but it still pricked each of the massive dead fays with a needle. After waiting for a quarter of an hour, the Blade Queen Bee began to suck the flesh and blood that had turned into a thick liquid inside the giant fay. The gray-haired man stood at the side with his eyes closed, obviously thinking about something. When he felt the Blade Queen Bee fall into his palm once more, he felt a chill run down his spine. The gray-haired man clenched his fist without hesitation and crushed the Blade Queen Bee in his palm. He muttered softly, "I'm sorry, Lord Seventh Page War. I killed the Blade Queen Bee that you bestowed on the Ash Squad and entrusted to me for safekeeping. But all of this is to better complete the decree that Lord Seventh Page War has given us." As the gray-haired man mumbled, he took out a grayish-purple crystal from the Blade Empress Bee's stomach, which had turned into a pile of minced meat. He took out a grayish-purple crystal from the Blade Queen Bee's stomach, which had turned into meat paste. He repeatedly rubbed his palms against the wall. The Blade Queen Bee ate the 7 dead diamond/fantasy breed fays, and the bee venom crystals in its stomach exploded. It's only equivalent to a full power attack from a diamond V/fantasy breed fay. If these 7 fays didn't die, they would have been eaten alive by the Blade Queen Bee. Then the bee venom crystals in the stomach must be equivalent to a full power attack from a diamond X/fantasy breed fay. After walking out of the stronghold, the gray-haired man gently clapped his hands as though he was summoning a fay. Dying for Lord Seventh Page War's law is the best way to die. It's wonderful to be able to see the Class 5-dimensional rift open before I die. I wonder if another sacred source life form descends after the Class 5-dimensional rift opens, along with the sacred source life form at the dimensional hub that has yet to break the protective barrier. Will it allow the Class 5-dimensional rift to evolve again? At this moment, a gray fly flapped its wings and made a buzzing sound. It flew close and landed on the gray-haired man's shoulder. After the gray fly landed on the gray-haired man's body, his entire body became illusory. The gray-haired man's aura was completely restrained. Even his body was only an illusory shadow when he moved. Upon hearing that an enemy was coming, Lu Jie and Zhou Luo immediately entered combat mode. Immediately after, Lin Yuan said, "That's right. Brother Lu, my source sand can only sense the approximate number of enemies, but it can't completely sense their strength. I'll create a quicksand vortex 1/2 meter in diameter on the seabed and release 2 hurricane owlet moths and 10 flesh-mincing blade insects. You can use these insects to probe the strength of the person coming." Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Lu Jie immediately commanded the insect queen to attach its will to the 10 flesh-mincing blade insects and hurricane owlet moths that Lin Yuan had released. He then looked at the enemy target. With this look, Lu Jie's face immediately revealed a look of surprise. Lu Jie was not surprised that the person coming was powerful, but he was surprised that the person coming was a little too weak. There were a total of 30 spirit chi professionals coming. The 30 spirit chi professionals rode on the diamond giant cattle together. Then, nearly 40 fays of all kinds followed the giant cattle and were rushing over. The combination of these 30 spirit chi professionals and fays was not so much like an oncoming enemy. It was more like the logistics team of the Architects Association. Although a large portion of these fays were not produced in the Radiance Federation, there were still a small portion of them. Most of these fays were not produced in the Radiance Federation. Most of these fays were not good at combat. For example, those diamond giant cattle were the most popular fays in the Architects Association. The stone that a diamond giant cattle could transport could speed up the construction period of the architect team by nearly 1/3. Lu Jie had never imagined that he would face such an enemy. The giant cattle, including the over 40 fays behind them, were all diamond fays. A few of them were diamond fays. However, even if Lin Yuan did not replenish Lu Jie's depleted spiritual power and multiply the insect swarm, just by relying on his usual combat ability, Lu Jie was confident that he could defeat such an enemy. Second chapter, Requesting Recommendation Votes and Monthly Votes. This book was written to the 500th chapter, which was considered a threshold. Book friends who want to see this chapter leave a comment. Say your opinion or blessings about this book. He. Love you moi. End of this chapter. Chapter 501. Although the spiritual power in his body had been restored by Lin Yuan, it was not enough to rely on the protein silkworm chrysalis alone. The insect queen's energy to synthesize insect proteins could not be obtained by just relying on the protein silkworm chrysalis. It also needed some nutrients that could only be obtained from meat, blood, and even bones. Lin Yuan was going to continue to inject more spiritual power into his body. However, because the insect queen's body lacked a lot of energy components that could not be obtained from the protein silkworm chrysalis, it had to stop the production of insect species phase. These huge diamond giant cattle and a group of non-combat class high-grade phase were just enough for the insect queen to control the insect swarm to have a good meal. However, Lu Jie suddenly came to a realization, and his brows furrowed. According to the 400 simplified hurricane owlet moths that he had sent out earlier, it seemed that the oncoming enemy was the weakest among the phase that he had detected. There was only one possibility for such an enemy to appear. They wanted to stall for time. The enemy would send these logistics personnel to fight, which was tantamount to sending them to their deaths. This behavior was enough to show that the enemy had the determination to cut off all means of retreat. Lin Yuan saw the expression on Lu Jie's face change again and quickly asked, "Big brother Lu, what's the situation?" Lu Jie hurriedly told Lin Yuan and Zhou Luo what he had seen. Lu Jie hurriedly told Lin Yuan and Zhou Luo what he had seen. Then Lu Jie also shared his thoughts. "I plan to use this batch of enemies' contracted phase as the insect queen's nutrient base to provide nutrients for the insect queen to continue producing insect swarms. Otherwise, without enough high-grade fey flesh, the insect swarm produced by the insect queen won't be able to reach the standard in shell strength." As he spoke, Lu Jie scratched his head with some embarrassment. Lu Jie felt that he had been negligent and had not expected such a situation to occur on this trip to Indigo Azure City. Under normal circumstances, Lu Jie would prepare the protein silkworm chrysalis in the diamond fey storage box to help the insect queen recover insect proteins. He would also prepare some high-grade fey flesh. Although this time was no exception, the high-grade dimensional lifeform's flesh was still a little insufficient for the production of so many insect swarms. This lesson made Lu Jie understand that in the future, his reserves of protein silkworm chrysalis and high-grade fey flesh in the diamond fey storage box would increase by at least 5 times or even 10 times. Only then would he be able to face all kinds of dangerous situations. The current situation of insufficient high-grade fey flesh would never happen again. The main reason for this was that Lu Jie had not expected Lin Yuan to have such a powerful spiritual power recovery ability. After listening to Lu Jie's words, Lin Yuan replied, "Brother Lu, let me handle this wave of enemies. You just have to be in charge of letting the insect swarm eat the phase that have sunk into the sea of sand and recover their energy." While speaking, Lin Yuan carefully sensed the spiritual power reserves in his body. There was still 1/3 of the spiritual power in the spirit chi imprint that had not been consumed. Although there was only 1/3 of the spiritual power left in the spiritual force imprint, the spiritual power accumulated by the Bronze X/Legend spirit drawing ichthyosaur over a long period of time was still a massive amount. Lin Yuan's decision to take on such a wave of enemies alone was to preserve Lu Jie's strength to the greatest extent. At the same time, it was also because the Bronze X/Fantasy Eye Source Sand had absorbed a portion of the mountain-containing embryo. It had officially advanced from Fantasy Eye to Fantasy 2. The Source Sand had formed a Gold Eye/Fantasy 2 elemental source-type life form. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Lu Jie immediately controlled a portion of the flesh-mincing blade insects that had been produced in the flows and when the insect queen's nutrients were insufficient in the later stages. They were ready to start a bloody feast. The lava dragon lizard ran extremely fast, and the enemies on the opposite side were also flying over. In a short while, Lin Yuan saw the oncoming enemies with his naked eye. When he took a closer look at the appearance of the spirit chi professional on the back of the diamond giant cattle running toward him, his pupils immediately constricted. Many of them looked very similar to the spirit chi professionals who had ambushed him in the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. Different places nurtured different people, and the appearances of the spirit chi professionals on different continents were also different. It was obvious from their appearances that they were not from the Radiance Federation. It was very likely that they were from the Dark Continent, like the spirit chi professional who had ambushed him previously. He used Morbius True Data to scan the large group of Fays that were coming at him. Then, he closed his eyes and used his spiritual energy to communicate with the source sand. After Lin Yuan communicated with the source sand, he immediately heard the boiling sound of the sea of sand under the seabed. At that moment, the spirit chi professionals riding on the backs of the diamond giant cattle also discovered the existence of Lin Yuan and the others. Although the large group of Fays on the opposite side were not good at fighting, they still had a certain killing power after reaching platinum or diamond. Many long-range attacks were released by these Fays toward the lava dragon lizard. Zhou Luo, who was riding the lava dragon lizard, shouted, "Lava dragon lizard, use lava shield." Immediately after, a spherical shield wrapped around the surface of the lava dragon lizard's body. It firmly protected the lava dragon lizard, Zhou Luo, Lin Yuan, and Lu Jie inside the shield. All kinds of attacks landed on the lava shield. Some splashed ripples, while some dissipated without even splashing. This wave of attacks could be said to have been blocked by Zhou Luo. After the lava dragon lizard awakened its dragon species bloodline and mutated to grow 2 heads, it was no longer the same as before. The strength of a diamond/fantasy breed was superior to an ordinary diamond Fey by an entire grade. Zhou Luo's existence had always been extremely low, but this time, Zhou Luo directly displayed his king-class strength. At the same time, the seabed within a 2-kilometer radius instantly turned into a boiling quicksand vortex. The opposing Fays were all running on land. As non-combat Fays, these terrestrial Fays were not mobile in the first place. This caused many platinum Fays to be pulled into the sea of sand by the gold/fantasy breed source sand, and they kept sinking. Without Lin Yuan doing anything, these sinking Fays were eaten alive by the flesh-mincing blade insects that Lu Jie had instructed to lurk on standby. Not even a trace of blood or bones was wasted. Compared to the Fays' flesh, the nutrients contained in the Fays' blood and bones were more needed by the insect queen. The few diamond giant cattle struggled violently in the sea of sand. I'm begging for monthly votes and recommendation votes. Sob, sob, sob. End of this chapter. Chapter 502. When a Fay's mobility was strong enough, it could run to its heart's content even in the boiling quicksand. It was just that the giant cattle was too cumbersome, and it could only ensure that its head would not sink into the quicksand when it struggled. Its body had already sunk into the quicksand except for a little place on its back. But even so, no matter how Lin Yuan made the source sand drag the giant cattle down, it could still rely on its own strength to move in the quicksand. However, the giant cattle's movement speed could really be described as an old cow pulling a cart. Upon seeing this, Lin Yuan let the source sand use its exclusive skill, Gravel Spirit Acceptance, which was equivalent to the Platinum 3/Elite Heart-Penetrating Iron Line, to kill the diamond giant cattle. But at that moment, Lin Yuan helplessly discovered something. Even if the source sand's Platinum 3/Elite Heart-Penetrating Iron Line could pierce into the giant cattle's body, it could only penetrate 0.5 meter of flesh. This was not enough to cause fatal harm to the 15-meter-long giant cattle. After some pretense, Lin Yuan finally understood the bitterness of mosquitoes in the summer. Some people with thick hair or rough skin were simply a nightmarish blow to hungry mosquitoes. After working hard for a night, not only did it not suck any blood, but the blood-sucking needle was blocked by the dandruff. However, Lin Yuan did not believe it and continued to command the heart-penetrating iron line to attack the giant cattle's 3 vulnerable parts. However, the giant cattle actually clamped its tail tightly between its legs, completely protecting its vulnerable parts. Lin Yuan curled his lips and took out a few heart-penetrating iron line that were much stronger than Platinum 3/Elite from his leaf-shaped diamond Fey storage box. After a simple test, Lin Yuan replaced the Gravel Spirit Acceptance's Platinum 3/Elite Heart-Penetrating Iron Line with a Platinum V/Flawless Heart-Penetrating Iron Line. This time, the needle in the mosquito's mouth was directly upgraded, even though it had only increased by 2 small grades. However, its quality had also improved by a level. The Platinum V/Flawless Heart-Penetrating Iron Line could already enter the giant cattle's body. It swam in the giant cattle's body and used the heart-penetrating iron line's old skill to penetrate the giant cattle's heart. For a moment, each of the giant cattle seemed to be suffering great pain from the front and the back of their feet. After each of the giant cattle let out a final cry, they stopped struggling. Even the spirit chi professional on the back of the diamond giant cattle sank into the quicksand vortex. This scene horrified Lu Jie and Zhou Luo. Lin Yuan's sea of sand was not as simple as it looked on the surface. There was obviously another world in the depths of the sea of sand. It was as if a demon with a sickle was hiding in the dark, ready to harvest the creatures in the sea of sand at any time. Lu Jie and Zhou Luo had seen Lin Yuan throwing the heart-penetrating iron line into the sea of sand. The demon in the deep sea should be related to the dead heart-penetrating iron line that Lin Yuan had thrown into the sea of sand. He just didn't know what the specific connection was. Then, Zhou Luo and Lu Jie saw Lin Yuan take out a large number of bronze ferromanganese and 1 cubic meter of gold day and night spirit silver from the face storage box. Lin Yuan threw the ferromanganese and the day and night spirit silver into the quicksand vortex formed by the source sand. The source sand had upgraded from Fantasy I to Fantasy II, and all its exclusive skills had been enhanced. Apart from the gravel spirit acceptance, which could accept stronger creatures, even the exclusive skill, Metal Consume Manifestation, could also swallow more metals. Its changed form had also become more refined. The source sand had only absorbed about half of the mountain-containing embryo. The remaining half was still holding the Earth Elemental Heavenly Maiden-grade elemental pearls produced by the thick Earth Elemental shellfish and fiddled with them like an old man. After absorbing the mountain-containing embryo's transformation ability, the source sand had produced 3 more layers of close guard sand than before. The increase in close guard sand was equivalent to Lin Yuan's defensive ability once again. Lu Jie let the flesh-mincing blade insects gnaw on the diamond giant cattle that had just died. At the same time, he urged the insect queen to use its exclusive skill, Blast Recovery, to explode the flesh-mincing blade insects that had devoured a large amount of flesh and bones to recover energy. The inside of the boiling sea of sand that Lin Yuan was urging was like a continuous series of farts. The puff, puff, puff sounds were continuous. Lin Yuan had always felt that his contracted red thorn was very bad for the child ramets and ramets it produced. However, after seeing Lu Jie's insect queen's method of producing insects, Lin Yuan felt that red thorn was really a warm and cute plant. Of course, the most important thing was red thorn's damned gentleness toward the child ramets and cluster plants. Of course, the most important thing was red thorn's damned gentleness toward the child ramets and cluster plants. In fact, Lin Yuan did not consume much spiritual power in his body when he urged the flows and to attack on a large scale this time. A large amount of gravel had been produced on the seabed. To a large extent, this large-scale quicksand was the source sand's instinctive behavior as an elemental source-type life form. The true consumption of spiritual power was to let the source sand use its exclusive skill to drive the heart-penetrating iron line to kill the diamond giant cattle. In a short while, a small quicksand vortex appeared under the lava dragon lizard's feet. The quicksand vortex spat out a few clear golden discs. Lin Yuan's eyes immediately lit up, and he jumped off the lava dragon lizard's back. He held these 30 clear golden metal discs in his hand and examined them one by one. After the examination, Lin Yuan found that these clear golden metal discs were almost identical to the one he had obtained before. However, the difference was that there was more or less a slight difference in the size of the space inside the discs. Lin Yuan was overjoyed. He was several times happier to obtain these clear golden metal discs than to obtain some precious spiritual ingredients. As more and more large spirit consumers appeared in Lin Yuan's spirit lock spatial zone, the energy ores stored in the original clear golden disc were also consumed faster and faster. Especially now that a total of 7 bronze/legend elemental shellfish were constantly producing elemental pearls, the spirit chi consumption had increased exponentially. This made Lin Yuan need to replenish the energy ores in the clear golden disc every short period of time. But now, with these 30 clear golden metal discs, Lin Yuan could finally replenish them. Lin Yuan could finally reduce a lot of trivial troubles. Even if Morbius Spirit Lock Spatial Zone advanced or too many large spirit consumers joined in, Lin Yuan could completely cope with it. At the same time, Lin Yuan could not help but think that since the enemy's Suicide Squad had the clear golden metal discs, then the others must have them too. Just as Lin Yuan was thinking about these clear golden metal discs, a violent spatial fluctuation suddenly came from a distance. Second update, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 503. Lin Yuan's, Lu Jie's, and Zhou Luo's expressions changed. The problem that they had been most worried about had actually happened. The fact that they could feel such a strong spatial fluctuation from so far away meant that the evolving Class 3 Water World Dimensional Rift had, for some reason, reached Class 4. It had even started to evolve from Class 4 to Class 5. The current situation was so severe that they had to race against time to take out the source-type item inside the dimensional hub. A normal dimensional rift's evolution would take around 12 hours. Therefore, Lin Yuan, Lu Jie, and Zhou Luo had always had time to plan and prepare. However, due to the influence of external factors, the dimensional rift had suddenly advanced by leaps and bounds. Furthermore, violent spatial fluctuations were constantly coming from not far away. This situation meant that the dimensional rift's evolution from Class 4 to Class 5 could be completed at any time. Lin Yuan knew that the mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen would definitely find out and be vigilant after they were sucked into the dimensional rift. However, no matter what kind of preparations they made, if the Class 5 dimensional rift really opened in the coastal sea so close to Indigo Azure City, then the entire city was destined to become underwater ruins. Just as Lin Yuan's and Lu Jie's expressions were getting darker, Zhou Luo also looked up into the distance. Then he turned to look at Lu Jie and immediately took a deep look at Lin Yuan. The faintly determined look between his eyebrows was even stronger, as if at this moment, Zhou Luo had deepened the decision he had made in his heart. Lin Yuan took a deep breath, which only stopped when his entire lungs swelled and ached. Then, he exhaled all at once, forcefully suppressing the rising sense of urgency in his heart, and calmly looked at Lu Jie and Zhou Luo. We'll rush directly toward the location of the dimensional hub. No matter what, we must stop the dimensional rift's evolution. Just as Lin Yuan's voice fell, Zhou Luo shouted before Lu Jie could speak. Okay. This word seemed to shout out all of Zhou Luo's courage. Zhou Luo did not understand why the blood in his heart was actually surging at this time. Zhou Luo could not tell if the passion in his heart was because this was Lin Yuan's idea. As a servant, he had to obey Lin Yuan's orders in order to repay Lin Yuan's kindness in giving him a new lease of life. Or was it because he simply saw the resolute light in the eyes of Lin Yuan and Lu Jie, the two Federation prodigies? Lu Jie didn't say anything. He just quickly manipulated the swarm of insects in the sea of sand under the seabed to gnaw on the dead diamond giant cattle with all their might. Lu Jie knew that there was a tough battle ahead. In such a dangerous situation, replenishing the energy within the insect queen's body was a huge luxury. Lu Jie raised his head and said, I left about 500 flesh-mincing blade insects here, and they can completely eat the phase under the sea of sand. It will still take some time for these diamond giant cattle to completely eat up the phase under the sea of sand. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan no longer hid the large amount of yellow sand that the source sand had produced under the seabed. Lin Yuan did not inject spiritual power into the source sand. It was only because the source sand had sensed Lin Yuan's command that it used its own body to move the entire sea of gravel. As far as the eye could see, the surroundings instantly turned into a world of gravel. Before Zhou Luo and Lu Jie had time to be shocked, everyone had once again boarded the lava dragon lizard's back. The rolling sand pushed the lava dragon lizard forward. Although it was not obvious, it actually increased the lava dragon lizard's running speed. At the same time, in the shallow coastal sea outside Indigo Azure City, outside the evolving dimensional rift, A woman dressed in a moon-colored robe with a half-murderous and half-worried expression on her face was bathed in the blood-stained moonlight. Bathing in the blood-stained moonlight, his powerful aura seeped out of his body without concealment. This woman in the moon-colored robe was the Moon Empress, who had arrived a few hours ago. The rich moonlight pulled open a curtain behind the Moon Empress. Inside the curtain were only the Moon Empress, Mystic Moon, and the dimensional rift entrance that had been sealed. Outside the curtain stood the Mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen. The Mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen were also shrouded in the rich moonlight. The moonlight covered the figures of the Mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen. Behind the Mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen stood an unknown number of experts in or near Indigo Azure City who had rushed over after learning of the Moon Empress' arrival. A large portion of these experts were creation masters. However, most of these experts had their bodies bowed and their eyes looking straight at the ground. It was as though raising their eyes was a kind of overstepping their authority. This included the 2 guard envoys who stood 5 positions behind the Mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen. Mystic Moon, who was behind the moonlight curtain, looked at the Moon Empress expression and understood even more how important Lin Yuan was to the Moon Empress. He had followed the Moon Empress for so many years, but he had never seen such a worried expression on her face. Furthermore, this worried expression had been hanging on the Moon Empress' face for a few hours. Mystic Moon lowered his head and glanced at the captivating red ethereal jellyfish in the Moon Empress' arms. Then, he looked at the little rabbit beside the Moon Empress' feet. Its ears drooped and it looked listless, as though it had lost its favor. Mystic Moon understood the worry in the Moon Empress' heart even more. It was not as simple as what she showed on her face. However, at this time, as one of the Moon Empress' 2 moon envoys, Mystic Moon still had to handle the matters that needed to be handled. Suddenly, Mystic Moon thought of something and whispered to the Moon Empress. "Moon Empress, on Cold Moon's side, should we?" Mystic Moon did not finish his sentence, but the Moon Empress understood the meaning behind his words. The Moon Empress frowned and pondered for 3 seconds before replying, "Yes." The Moon Empress naturally knew that when Mystic Moon mentioned Cold Moon, he was actually referring to Chu Ci. The Moon Empress was very clear about the relationship between Lin Yuan and Chu Ci. At this time, Lin Yuan could be said to be at a life-and-death juncture. The Moon Empress put herself in his shoes and felt that Chu Ci needed to know. After all, she was Lin Yuan's master. If she did not know at this time, it would be absolutely unacceptable for her. In the world, it was better to have less trouble than more trouble. In the face of true family love, smooth worldly wisdom seemed more like fallacies. Moreover, it was not just Chu Ci. Cold Moon was one of the 2 moon envoys. At this time, Cold Moon should also be standing here waiting for the Radiant Moon Palace's young lord. Return. First update, seeking recommendation votes, monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 504. Mystic Moon turned around and walked out of the curtain formed by the moonlight. At the same time, she was thinking about how to speak to Cold Moon. The feeling of conveying bad news was too heart-wrenching. The moment Mystic Moon walked out of the moonlight curtain, the Mother of Bloodbath immediately stepped forward and hurriedly asked, "Lin Yuan, Lin Yuan." Before the Mother of Bloodbath could finish speaking, Mystic Moon raised her eyes and glanced at the Mother of Bloodbath. "You didn't take up the responsibility of a path protector and betrayed the Moon Empress' trust." Mystic Moon's words were like a sword that stabbed directly into the Mother of Bloodbath's spider heart. The Mother of Bloodbath's face was originally filled with worry, but after Mystic Moon's words, it immediately turned as pale as a piece of white cardboard. Mystic Moon didn't care about the Mother of Bloodbath's reaction, but when she passed by it, she said, "You also betrayed Lin Yuan's trust. You also betrayed Lin Yuan's trust." If Xian Yu's previous words were like a sword, then Xian Yu's words were like a sword. Now, Mystic Moon's words were treating the Mother of Bloodbath's spider heart as if it were a cake, repeatedly hammering it with a big hammer. Endless Summer hurriedly reached out and grabbed the Mother of Bloodbath, giving it some strength. After listening to Mystic Moon's words, Endless Summer had the same feeling as the mother of Bloodbath. It could be considered as empathizing. Although Endless Summer wasn't Lin Yuan's path protector, as a guardian, it also had the responsibility to protect Lin Yuan's safety. While Xian Yu's words were directed at the mother of Bloodbath, they were also directed at herself. When Mystic Moon's figure appeared through the dense moonlight, a few of the experts who were bowing slightly raised their heads. The two guard envoys standing at the forefront hurriedly stepped forward and asked, "Lady Mystic Moon, what are the Moon Empress arrangements here?" The two guard envoys were very anxious. The two of them had come to Indigo Azure City for a mission, but there were simply too many twists and turns. Previously, because of the energy fluctuations from the experts' battle, they had come to this deserted island to investigate and had unexpectedly encountered the Moon Empress' brilliant disciple. Now, the Moon Empress had personally come to this deserted island. Thinking about it, something must have happened to the little ancestor that the two of them had met earlier, who had called them seniors and made their teeth ache. If they had known this would happen, they wouldn't have left in such a hurry. Instead, they would have stayed on this deserted island. Now, a controlled Class 3 water world dimensional rift had unexpectedly appeared in the sea region so close to Indigo Azure City. Most importantly, this controlled Class 3 water world dimensional rift was still evolving. This was a huge matter. Even though the two guard envoys were used to great storms and waves, they did not know what to do at this moment. Duan He, who was standing quite a distance behind the two guard envoys, secretly raised his head. However, Duan He didn't look straight ahead. Instead, he looked to his left and right. Duan He could not help but sigh inwardly. How many Class 4 creation masters are standing beside me? I'm afraid that all the nearby Class 4 creation masters that can rush over are already here. Even if the Indigo Azure City's Creation Master Association had a major event, it wouldn't be possible to see so many Class 4 creation masters gathered in one place. Duan He sneakily raised his head and looked forward. However, with just a single glance, Duan He felt that the three figures in the distant dense moonlight were vaguely familiar. Due to being covered by the dense moonlight, Duan He couldn't think of anything for a moment. At that moment, Duan He heard a clear, cold, and pleasing voice. This cold voice was like a frozen osmanthus branch that had fallen to the ground, and it had an indescribable solemnity. It was as though she was conveying an order that no one could defy. Mystic Moon, go and inform the Imperial Court that this dimensional rift has to be arranged and prepared in advance according to the standards of Class 5 and above dimensional rifts. The Moon Empress' voice was like a cold star descending from the sky, causing everyone's heart to skip a beat. At the same time, a horrified expression arose on their faces. Did the Moon Empress just say a dimensional rift that was Class 5 and above? This kind of dimensional rift had never been heard of before. At that moment, the two guard envoys' foreheads were dripping with cold sweat. They were worried about the dimensional rift that the Moon Empress had mentioned. They didn't expect that the Moon Empress would actually call out their names. Guard envoys of the Spirit Guards, go and ask the Chief Guard of the Spirit Guards, Night Leaning Moon, to personally come and oversee things. The lava dragon lizard sped across the sea of sand. A minute ago, Lin Yuan had already sensed something rushing toward them from the sea of sand made of endless gravel in the distance. Lin Yuan said to Lu Jie in a deep voice, "Big Brother Lu, don't hold back in the battle later. Big Brother Lu, don't hold back when we fight later. Let's finish this quickly." Lu Jie immediately responded, "Okay, I'll let the lightning-gathering moths use the lightning beams that I've condensed in advance to launch a long-range attack." The lightning-gathering moths that had absorbed the plasma caterpillar's plasma energy could be considered the strongest attack among the sea of insects that Lu Jie controlled. Originally, Lu Jie and Lin Yuan had planned to use these lightning-gathering moths, which had absorbed the plasma energy from the plasma caterpillars, as a trump card for sneak attacks. However, in this race against time, using one's brain to fight was no longer advisable. They could only rush forward and rush all the way to the dimensional hub. Based on the situation in the sea of sand, Lin Yuan knew that the incoming enemy was indeed tough. This was because the incoming phase were extremely mobile. Even on the sea of sand full of quicksand vortexes, the source sand kept pulling them down. These fays could still rely on their extremely strong mobility and would not be too affected in the process of advancing. The lava dragon lizard's speed did not slow down because it was going to engage in close combat with the enemy. Soon, after seeing the opposite situation, Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly constricted. Lin Yuan could only see that each of the fays that were running toward him was a huge, strange object that seemed to have blades in its body. Lin Yuan immediately used true data to examine the largest strange object at the front, which seemed to have blades inserted into its body. Fey name: Blade Worm, Blade Queen Bee Larva. Fey species: Arthropodides/vermiform. Fey grade: Diamond, 7/10. Fey type: Metal. Fey quality: Flawless. With one look, Lin Yuan knew what these strange creatures with blade-like blades in their bodies were. They were actually larvae hatched from the Blade Queen Bee's eggs. However, the bodies of these blade worms were too short. They were like fat sea cucumbers. Instead of calling them blade worms, it would be better to call them fat sea cucumbers. The second one was even better. The third one had been restored. End of this chapter. Chapter 505. However, Lin Yuan did not dare to underestimate these blade worms that looked like fat sea cucumbers. The Blade Queen Bee was a carcinoma fey that was recorded by the spirit guards. The Blade Queen Bee was considered one of the most destructive carcinoma feys in the spirit guards' records. It was not that the Blade Queen Bee was strong in single combat. On the contrary, the Blade Queen Bee did not have much combat power. In order to successfully lay eggs, the Blade Queen Bee produced a terrifying mental toxin and a sharp stinger that had a strong penetrating effect. Although the Blade Queen Bee did not have much combat power, the blade worms that the Blade Queen Bee gave birth to were war machines that excelled in killing. The Blade Queen Bee relied on pure physical strength to fight and kill. Therefore, Lin Yuan could only fight head-on. However, Lin Yuan felt extremely fortunate to be able to fight head-on. The current situation could be said to be extremely good news. This was the Water World Dimensional Rift, and the Blade Queen Bee would require a sufficient number of fresh fays to produce blade worms. After the Blade Queen Bee produced the blade worm's eggs, the mental toxin that the Blade Queen Bee injected into the target's body would fuse with the mental toxin on the blade worm's eggshell. It would immediately transform into a mental toxin that would take the target's life in an instant. This could also be considered a protective mechanism. After the death of the host, the blade worm's eggshell would break. The newly hatched blade worms would eat the target's brain. The reason why the blade worms would first eat the target's brain was because of the two mental toxins. Even if the host died, the memories in the brain would be completely preserved. The hatched blade worm larvae would steal the previous host's combat experience and techniques. As a result, every blade worm would turn into a war machine that excelled in combat the moment it matured. This was also why the logistics phase that had come to die previously were not transformed into blade worms. After eating the brain, the newly hatched blade worm would drill through the target's body and breathe its first breath of air. Then, it would devour the host's internal organs, flesh, and bones. After the blade worm broke out of its shell and absorbed all the energy in its host's body. After growing up, their level and quality would become the same as the host's level and quality. As for the high-grade Water World dimensional life forms in the Water World Dimensional Rift, they would instantly decay upon death. He didn't give the blade worms any time to feast on them. That was probably why there weren't many blade worms in front of him. As long as there was enough energy, the Blade Queen Bee could produce a batch of eggs within its body in about 48 hours. The Blade Queen Bee's production speed was considered slow among the carcinoma phase. However, it was still dozens or even hundreds of times superior to ordinary phase. The current environment did not have enough material for the Blade Queen Bee to lay eggs. Otherwise, if there were enough materials, they would have no chance of winning at all. Lin Yuan used true data to check the number and grade of the blade worms. After reading it, Lin Yuan shouted, "Come on! 25 diamond blade worms and 47 platinum blade worms. Big Brother Lu, let the charged lightning-gathering moths ignore the diamond blade worms. Let's kill the 47 platinum blade worms first." When Lu Jie heard Lin Yuan say there were 25 diamond blade worms, he immediately stopped counting the insect swarm's energy consumption. He immediately stopped calculating the insect swarm's consumption and summoned 300 lightning-gathering moths that had been charged in advance from the quicksand vortex that Lin Yuan had opened up. Lu Jie immediately commanded the 100 lightning-gathering moths to absorb a large amount of plasma caterpillar's plasma and form a lightning beam. From high up in the sky, they shot toward the 47 platinum blade worms that were running behind the 25 diamond blade worms. 100 dazzling bluish-purple lightning bolts let out a thunderous roar. The 100 bolts of purplish-blue lightning struck the bodies of the 47 platinum blade worms, electrocuting the sand beneath their feet into a viscous, mud-like liquid. Lu Jie, Lin Yuan, and Zhou Luo held their breaths as they watched the lightning feast. However, when the lightning dissipated, it was discovered that the 100 lightning-gathering moths had only managed to kill one platinum blade worm. Although there were still 7 or 8 platinum blade worms lying on the ground, the lightning beams had left a few large holes on their bodies. But very quickly, the holes on the blade worms' bodies began to sprout sharp keratin that looked like sharp blades. The gap on the blade worm's body was completely sealed. Through true data, Lin Yuan found that the platinum 9 blade worm on the ground had dropped to platinum 4 after its injuries had been healed with the blade keratin that it had grown. Although the blade worm's levels had dropped after recovering, the keratin that had been used to mend their wounds still looked exceptionally ferocious. Lu Jie said in a low voice as he looked ahead at the blade worms that were charging at him after they recovered. "I intend to use Battle Plan 4. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan immediately responded. "You take the lead. I'll let the source sand support you." Lin Yuan injected spiritual power into the sea of sand that the source sand had created. As the sea of sand boiled, 150 shield ladybugs crawled out of it. The 50 shield ladybugs formed a layer, and there were 3 layers in total, blocking the lava dragon lizard. After the shield ladybugs were summoned, Zhou Luo started to cast lava shield on the first row of shield ladybugs one by one. This time, Lu Jie did not let the remaining 200 lightning-gathering moths continue to shoot lightning beams at the platinum blade worms. Instead, the 200 charged lightning-gathering moths and the 100 lightning-gathering moths that had finished firing their lightning-gathering beams flew straight at the remaining 46 platinum blade worms that were charging at them. When the 200 charged lightning-gathering moths got close, they shot out the lightning beams from their bodies. Just as the lightning beam was about to land on the platinum blade worm, the blade worm's body trembled. Insect Queen, use Blast Recovery. Insect Queen, use Blast Recovery. The sound of plasma crackling, mixed with the roar of 300 lightning-gathering moths self-destructing, exploded in the midst of the 46 platinum blade worms. First update. Hee, I'm synchronized to the starting point. End of this chapter. Chapter 506. Lu Jie did not stop attacking. Instead, he continued to command the 200 plasma caterpillars that had just emerged from the quicksand to throw themselves into the violent lightning and self-destruct. After that, Lu Jie no longer cared about the lives of the 46 platinum blade worms. Instead, he directed the thousands of flesh-mincing blade worms that had emerged from the quicksand to charge at the 25 diamond blade worms. Lu Jie knew that no matter how strong the 47 platinum blade worms' regenerative abilities were, they would not be able to survive the attack just now. At that moment, Lin Yuan had already controlled the source sand to cover each flesh-mincing blade insect with a thin layer of sand. On this thin layer of sand, Lin Yuan allowed the source sand to precipitate a high concentration of ferromanganese. The ferromanganese would certainly slow down the flesh-mincing blade worm's speed, but it would not affect Lu Jie's Battle Plan 4. Lu Jie's Battle Plan 4 did not care about the individual uses of the insect units. Instead, he treated each insect unit produced by the Insect Queen as a consumable that could be used to explode. Using art was to fight in the form of explosions. It made Lu Jie look like a terrorist. However, such a battle method was extremely suitable for the current situation. On the battlefield, everything happened in the blink of an eye. No matter what method was used, he had to stop these diamond blade worms from approaching. If these blade worms were allowed to get close, they would not be able to stop the dimensional rift's advancement. Even Lin Yuan, Lu Jie, and Zhou Luo would not be able to keep their lives. A portion of the flesh-mincing blade worms charged at the 25 diamond blade worms from the ground. The rest of the flesh-mincing blade worms were transported underground. Through the source sand, these self-destructing flesh-mincing blade worms were transported directly below the diamond blade worms. Lu Jie used the hurricane owlet moths to control the hurricane, using the power of the wind to restrict the diamond blade worm speed. The hurricane blew up the yellow sand, giving Lin Yuan a chance to control the hurricane owlet moths. Amidst the yellow sand, a large number of ferromanganese chain swords appeared. When these ferromanganese chains locked onto the diamond blade worms, the diamond blade worms would immediately break free from them. However, coupled with the fierce hurricane, the speed of the 25 diamond blade worms was reduced by more than 70%. All of the insect units were ready to go. Lu Jie looked at the 150 ladybugs in front of the lava dragon lizard and gritted his teeth. The 150 shield ladybugs flapped their wings and flew towards the 25 diamond blade worms. Zhou Luo, who had been releasing his shield all this while, immediately shouted, "Lava dragon lizard, use elemental release." In an instant, a thin layer of elemental energy suddenly surged on the lava shields of the 50 shield ladybugs flying at the forefront. The entire shield was covered in a layer of raging fire. Following that, the hurricane owlet moths that were driving the hurricane stopped. Instead, they swooped down on the 25 diamond blade worms. From top to bottom, from left to right, an explosion rang out at the same time. A massive amount of energy was retracted into the insect queen's body, causing a layer of green energy flame to light up on the surface of the insect queen's body. This was a sign that the insect queen's body was full of energy. At this moment, the sea of insects that Lu Jie and Lin Yuan had created was almost completely depleted. It could be said that apart from Lin Yuan's extreme token, everyone had used all the power they could use in this attack. They had not held back at all. At that moment, Lin Yuan suddenly thought of the effect of the lava dragon lizard's exclusive skill. Zhou Luo's exclusive skill, elemental release, had released the fire elemental energy from the lava dragon lizard's new head, effectively increasing the power of the explosion. When Lin Yuan had been recruiting white-clothed followers, he had focused on freezing cold's contracted phase in the purchase with no loss store. Lin Yuan had only taken a glance at Zhou Luo's phase and had not paid much attention to their abilities or exclusive skills. Especially after the iron bone-splitting lizard had evolved into a lava dragon lizard, its abilities and exclusive skills must have changed a lot. He used Morbius True Data to check on the lava dragon lizard he was riding on. Fey name, Lava Dragon Lizard, Fey species. Iguana/giant iguana, Fey grade. Diamond, 1/10. Fey type, Earth/Fire, Fey quality. Fantasy eye abilities frowny face sturdy head lizard ram. Strengthens the skull's hardness and condenses all the body's strength on the head for a ram. Shield tail block. Strengthens the skin on the tail to form a shield's keratin, effectively blocking damage. Lizard roar. Enhances the flow of blood in the body through the roar, filling the bones on the lizard's skin with blood and increasing defense. Thick shield. Casts a double-layered shield on a single target. The hollow part of the double-layered shield can effectively cushion physical and energy damage. Lava sturdy shield. Fuses the body's earth-type and fire-type energy into lava energy and casts a single-layered shield filled with lava energy on multiple targets. Shield regeneration. Uses the body's energy to repair the broken shield. Before the body's energy is exhausted, as long as the shield doesn't receive a destructive attack, it will immediately be repaired. Exclusive skill frowny face unyielding iron bones. When receiving an external attack, each attack will consume a corresponding amount of combat power to increase the body's defense until the end of life. Elemental release. Releases the elemental energy contained in the body to cast any outer layer of the shield, enhancing the shield's original elemental characteristics. After this check, if Lin Yuan really wanted to evaluate this lava dragon lizard, he could only say that its abilities could barely be considered average. It was far inferior to Shirsu's contracted silent thunder armored crocodile's defense ability, which was more flexible and comprehensive. Moreover, the normal, elite, and bronze abilities only had an effect on the lava dragon lizard itself. This greatly reduced the lava dragon lizard's usefulness as a defense-type Fey in a team. However, Lin Yuan felt that the exclusive skill, Unyielding Iron Bones, was a little special. When Lu Jie had been commanding the battle earlier, he had already made the insect queen transform into an insect base and continue to produce insect swarms. He was trying to make up for the losses from the previous battle. The smoke and dust from the distant explosion had yet to disperse. However, at this moment, a strange hiss suddenly rang out amidst the silent explosion. Second update. Sob, 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 I beg for monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 507. A strange hissing sound rang out in the midst of the silent explosion. It sounded like a final wail. But no matter how one listened to it, there was an unconcealable sense of despair and madness in the wail. Upon hearing this strange cry that was mixed with despair and madness, Lin Yuan immediately thought, not good. The blade worms were war machines produced by the Blade Queen Bee, a war-type carcinoma Fey. Under normal circumstances, they were born purely for battle and did not have any emotions. But now, the blade worm's screeches were clearly emotional. This situation meant that the Blade Queen Bee was dead. Only after the Blade Queen Bee died would the suppressed genes in the blade worms be released. Lin Yuan summoned Genius and took off the strange mask that Hu Quan had created. Instead, he put on Genius's tool transformation mask. Then, Lin Yuan carefully examined his surroundings. The time of the Blade Queen Bee's death was too coincidental. It coincided with the moment when the 25 diamond blade worms were attacked. Logically speaking, the self-destruction of such a large swarm of bugs should have been enough to kill 25 diamond blade worms. But due to the Blade Queen Bee's coincidental death, the suppressed genes in the blade worms were released. Who knew how many blade worms had survived the explosion? Lin Yuan put on Genius's tool transformation mask and looked around, but he did not find anything. Even if he did not find anything, it meant something. The Blade Queen Bee was a Cancer Fey that excelled in concealment. It would not have died for no reason. For this to happen, it meant that someone had killed the Blade Queen Bee. When the dust settled, the diamond blade worms were piled up into a small mountain. The outer layer of the blade worms had all turned into charcoal in the explosion. At that moment, the mountain of 25 diamond blade worms suddenly began to shake. Suddenly, 8 blade worms that looked like sea urchins crawled out of the hill, their bodies covered in blade horn-like thorns. This could be seen from the densely packed cuticle on the blade worms' bodies. These blade worms had suffered serious injuries in the explosion, even with so many diamond-level comrades protecting them from the outside. Using true data, the 8 blade worms that crawled out of the cave must have been at least diamond rank before. Now that they had recovered from their injuries, the highest level they had was still diamond level 5. Even the weakest among them had reached diamond rank level 2. Under the densely packed blade keratin, Lin Yuan could vaguely see that the 8 surviving diamond blade worms' hardened purple-gray skin had now turned purple-red. The 8 blade worms were not in a hurry to charge toward Lin Yuan's group. Instead, it turned around and let out a sorrowful cry towards the distance. With the death of the Blade Queen Bee, it was the end of the blade worms. Amidst their sorrowful cries, the aura of the 8 blade worms grew stronger and stronger. At that moment, an intense dimensional fluctuation came from afar. This time, the frequency of the dimensional fluctuation was extremely high. The high-frequency dimensional fluctuation formed a whistling sound that sounded like boiling water. The sudden dimensional fluctuation formed a whistle, causing Lin Yuan, Lu Jie, and Zhou Luo's expressions to change in horror. The sound coming from the dimensional hub meant that the dimensional rift's evolution would be completed within an hour. Given the lava dragon lizard's speed, it would take at least 50 minutes to reach the dimensional hub from where Lin Yuan was standing. Moreover, this was under the condition that there were no obstacles along the way. Even if Lu Jie's insect queen created hurricane owlet moths in groups of 4 and controlled the wind element to fly Lin Yuan at full speed, it would take at least half an hour to reach the dimensional hub. It could be said that time waited for no man. Everything was imminent. What's more, there were 8 diamond blade worms blocking his way. Behind the determined expression on Zhou Luo's face, there was suddenly an extremely serious look of hope. Zhou Luo turned to Lin Yuan and asked in a serious tone, "Young master, what does it feel like to be a hero?" Lin Yuan was thinking about how to get through the current crisis. When he heard Zhou Luo's question, he was startled. He felt that Zhou Luo's question was very strange. However, Lin Yuan still answered, "I don't know what it feels like to be a hero." After the incident at Millstone Town, Lin Yuan had only used Black's identity during the Celestial Stairway duel in the Star Web Tower. In addition, Lin Yuan was too lazy to browse the forums. He didn't even join Black's fan club. Therefore, Lin Yuan had never experienced the feeling of being a hero. When Zhou Luo heard Lin Yuan's words, he was startled. However, Lin Yuan continued to speak. "Some things require someone to carry the burden. I'm not a true hero, and I won't try my best to be a hero. However, if I really encounter it, I won't shirk my responsibilities." After hearing Lin Yuan's words, Zhou Luo's eyes suddenly flickered with a special expression. There seemed to be glowing spots of light in this special expression. The radiant light constantly emitted from Zhou Luo's eyes, causing Zhou Luo's originally determined expression to have a hint of solemnity. Lin Yuan was about to make arrangements for the battle when he heard Zhou Luo speak. "Young master, you guys go to the dimensional hub. Leave these 8 strange insects to me and my old partner." When Lin Yuan heard Zhou Luo's words, he looked at Zhou Luo deeply. When Lu Jie was also commanding the insect queen to create the hurricane owlet moths, he suddenly looked at Zhou Luo with a different kind of recognition. When Zhou Luo saw Lin Yuan and Lu Jie looking at him, he smiled freely. "Don't worry, my old partner is very stubborn. Once I'm done with these 8 strange insects, I'll meet up with you guys at the front. After that, we'll leave this place together." As Zhou Luo spoke, he looked in the direction of the dimensional hub with a worried expression. However, when he looked at the 8 diamond blade worms, Zhou Luo's eyes were only free and determined. Lin Yuan took a deep breath. Zhou Luo had stepped forward to stop the 8 blade worms that had activated their hidden genes after the death of the blade queen bees. They must have been prepared to die. Even if the lava dragon lizard was a diamond/fantasy breed, it was still just Diamond Eye, and it was a defense-type fae. First more, end of this chapter. Chapter 508. Lu Jie had already created 8 hurricane owlet moths and said to Lin Yuan, "Brother Zhou's decision is right. The 2 of us will continue forward. If we encounter any more danger, I'll take the lead. We must send young master to the dimensional hub." Upon hearing Lu Jie's words, Lin Yuan felt that something heavy was pressing down on his heart. Lin Yuan understood the meaning behind Lu Jie's words, and Lu Jie's words were also very clear. Lu Jie had made the same decision as Zhou Luo. At that moment, Lin Yuan's determination to prevent the dimensional rift's evolution did not waver. He just felt that relying solely on his own strength was still too weak in the face of such a disaster. Lin Yuan turned around and spoke to Zhou Luo. "Brother Zhou, I want to give you something." When Lin Yuan and Lu Jie called him Brother Zhou, Zhou Luo was stunned. A sense of recognition rose in his heart. The feeling of being recognized by his companions warmed Zhou Luo's heart. When Zhou Luo heard Lin Yuan's words, he stretched out his hand. However, he still had some doubts in his heart. What exactly is Lin Yuan going to give me? However, when Zhou Luo saw what Lin Yuan took out, he quickly used both hands instead of one. The heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls of various attributes were piled together in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. He took out all the fire elemental pearls produced by the scorching elemental shellfish and the earth elemental pearls produced by the thick earth shellfish and put them in Zhou Luo's hands. Lin Yuan had spent all the elemental pearls previously. The amount he had on hand was only the production from 2 days of time. However, they had produced a total of 100 pills in the past 2 days. Most of them were earth element heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls. The fire element heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls only took up a small portion of them due to the absorption of the twin red pagoda. Zhou Luo's lava dragon lizard was a fire-earth dual elemental fae. In addition, the lava dragon lizard's exclusive skill, elemental release, could ingeniously enhance the shield with elemental energy. It was obvious that these heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls could assist in releasing the lava dragon lizard's exclusive skill. Even though using heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls to replenish elemental energy in battle was a very wasteful action. However, these 100 heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls could greatly increase the lava dragon lizard's combat power. Time was of the essence. After giving the elemental pearls to Zhou Luo, Lin Yuan and Lu Jie flew toward the dimensional hub with 4 hurricane owlet moths each. Zhou Luo looked at the 100 heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls in his hand, sensing the massive elemental energy contained within them. Zhou Luo's determination to die suddenly gave birth to a trace of life. However, if this trace of life wave wanted to be converted into life force, it had to be reborn from death. He had to give it his all to kill these 8 diamond blade worms. Zhou Luo patted both of the lava japalura's necks. He had done this countless times, and it had long since become a habit that was akin to sleeping. Zhou Luo whispered to the lava japalura, "Old friend, it's time for us to fight side by side again. Let us 2 salted fish do something that can make us shine." Upon hearing Zhou Luo's words, the lava japalura activated its skill, Lizard Roar. In an instant, the bony protrusions on the lava japalura's skin became stronger due to the blood rush. Immediately after, the lava japalura covered its huge body with a thick shield. Then, it put on a layer of lava shield on top of the thick shield. Then, it raised its 2 heads and used all the strength in its body to ram into the 8 blade worms, directly hitting 2 diamond blade worms. The shield hit the blade worm's cuticles and let out a teeth-numbing sound. At that moment, it was full of killing intent and blood. At that moment, Zhou Luo could not help but feel as though he had returned to his childhood. An extremely talented youth from a poor family. An iron bone iguana that had no teamwork in its skills and exclusive skills before silver. Along the way, it had swallowed countless darkness and suffered countless hardships. The sturdy head lizard ram, shield tail block, lizard roar, and the exclusive skill unyielding iron bones seemed to have been predestined in this battle. At that moment, the effects of these skills and exclusive skills were displayed to the extreme. The lizard roar, the headbutt, and the sound of the cuticles hitting the lizard tail shield. Behind these tragic sounds, a man and a lizard were building a barrier for the entire Indigo Azure City, isolating it from the Class 5-dimensional rift's monstrous waves. The tragic sound was like the sound of nature at this moment, becoming an impassioned song amidst the waves of yellow sand that were stirred up. One after another, the heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls were crushed by Zhou Luo. However, he felt that the lava japalura had absorbed too much elemental energy, and its perception of elemental energy had become a little sluggish. Zhou Luo looked at the remaining 3 diamond blade worms that were still able to stand up. He ordered the lava dragon lizard to remove the shield on its body. After removing its shield, the lava japalura's body was full of bloody holes caused by the cuticles. The entire lava japalura looked like it was bathed in blood. Even Zhou Luo's legs had been torn open by the cuticles of the blade worms. At that moment, Zhou Luo was on the lava japalura's body, injecting the last trace of his spiritual power into it. Although the spiritual energy in Zhou Luo's body had been exhausted, at this moment, Zhou Luo, who was 7 feet tall, stood with his back straight. His lofty sentiments were filled with radiant glory. The dull sounds of the cuticles piercing into the shield continued. When the last diamond blade worm fell to the ground and could no longer get up, it could only squirm. The 10-meter-long lava japalura crashed to the ground, and Zhou Luo also fell to the ground. Said Zhou Luo as he stood up shakily. He looked at the lava japalura which was on the verge of death and was on its last breath. "Old friend, your exclusive skill, unyielding iron bones, allowed us to last until the end. We survived. Thank you." With that, Zhou Luo summoned the bronze X/epic dark snake dragon lizard that he had contracted but had not had the time to nurture. The moment the dark snake dragon lizard appeared, it immediately unleashed a torrent of dark elemental energy at the wriggling blade worm. Even after the dark snake dragon lizard had emptied its energy, the blade worm was still breathing, but it no longer had the strength to squirm. Zhou Luo picked up a broken cuticle from the ground and walked in front of the diamond blade worm. He personally pierced the sharp blade keratin into the fist-sized head of the blade worm. Zhou Luo suddenly understood what it felt like to be a hero. It was a feeling of wind and rain, of grass and trees falling. But with his own shoulders, he carried the grass and the birds flew. This feeling had nothing to do with praise. It was just a sense of mission that was engraved with radiance. The second was even better. End of chapter. Chapter 509. Zhou Luo raised his head, looked into the distance, and shouted with all his might. Lin Yuan, Lu Jie, it's all up to you now. After shouting, Zhou Luo staggered over to the lava dragon lizard. He took out some ointment made of spiritual ingredients from the face storage box and was about to apply it on the lava dragon lizard. However, at that moment, when Zhou Luo's tense mind relaxed, he immediately felt dizzy from the excessive blood loss on his leg. The sudden dizziness caused Zhou Luo's vision to turn black. He fell beside the lava dragon lizard and fell into a deep sleep. Lin Yuan was currently being carried by 4 hurricane owlet moths toward the dimensional hub at the fastest speed possible. On one hand, Lin Yuan was worried about Zhou Luo's situation. On the other hand, he was rather surprised by the tranquility of the journey. The source sand grains had already been laid out at the dimensional hub's location. Lin Yuan had been urging the source sand to continuously create sand under the seabed with the dimensional hub as the center. The source sand grains had completely enveloped a 3-kilometer radius around the dimensional hub. The source sand was not sensitive to small vibrations on the seabed surface, but it could easily sense violent vibrations. Within this range, Lin Yuan did not receive any information from the source sand about any violent vibrations on the seabed surface. There shouldn't be any large phase like the blade worms near the dimensional hub. The hurricane owlet moths carried Lin Yuan and Lu Jie for nearly 5 minutes, and Lin Yuan immediately saw many established strongholds below his feet. It was obvious that there had been people living here for a long time. Lu Jie looked at the strongholds and said to Lin Yuan in a deep voice, "This place is very close to the dimensional hub. We're already very close to the dimensional hub. Should we descend from here and walk to the dimensional hub, or should we let the hurricane owlet moths fly us there?" Lu Jie looked at the strongholds on the ground with vigilance. Although these strongholds looked rather dead from above, Lu Jie could not be sure if there were any spirit chi professionals in these strongholds. If there were, wouldn't they become 2 glaring live targets in the sky? Lin Yuan did not know why, but the closer he got to the dimensional hub, the more he felt a sense of urgency. The dimensional fluctuations here were simply too intense. If he did not immediately stop the dimensional rift's evolution, he would not feel at ease. Lin Yuan looked in the direction of the dimensional hub and said to Lu Jie, "Brother Lu, let's rush over." After receiving Lin Yuan's answer, Lu Jie immediately commanded the insect queen to create 4 shield ladybugs. After the 4 shield ladybugs were created, they opened up the carapace on their backs and flapped the wings under the carapace. They were like 4 guards, ready to use their bodies as shields to block attacks from the ground at any time. However, the shield ladybug's flying speed clearly couldn't keep up with the hurricane owlet moth. Lu Jie let the insect queen execute its exclusive skill, Insect Swarm Frenzy, on the 4 shield ladybugs. At the cost of consuming the shield ladybug's life force, the shield ladybug could keep up with the hurricane owlet moth's speed. Long before he made the decision, he already had a solution for the strongholds under his feet. When it came to fighting platinum and diamond blade worms, the source sand could not do anything. However, when it came to demolishing homes, the source sand was definitely number 1. Following Lin Yuan's command, the land within a 3-kilometer radius turned into a surging world of yellow sand. The stronghold built on the seabed was instantly engulfed by the surging yellow sand. In the process of being engulfed, it was also crushed by the sand particles and became a part of the sea of sand. Lu Jie's eyelids twitched when he saw this scene. He could not help but think of the diamond earth-turning giant elephants that Wen Yu had found to flatten the manor. Even when the earth-turning giant elephants had flattened the land, It had not been as spectacular as this surging sea of sand. Lu Jie suddenly felt that it was not strange at all that Lin Yuan had so many resources on hand. Just by buying sand, he could earn quite a lot in a day. Lin Yuan realized that the source sand he had contracted either had the ability to seek treasures or was a money grubber. After the source sand had engulfed the land where the stronghold was built, it had actually found plenty of resources. Among them were many golden metal discs that Lin Yuan needed. However, according to the source sand's feedback, the sea of sand had not engulfed any life forms. Moreover, those golden metal discs were almost all piled up together. This was really strange. However, Lin Yuan did not think too much at this time because the hub of the evolving dimensional rift soon appeared in his line of sight. This was the first time Lin Yuan had seen what a dimensional hub looked like. For some reason, Lin Yuan felt that the dimensional hub was a little familiar. No matter how he looked at it, it was a bit like the stone pillar carvings that appeared after Morbius had the spirit chi condensation ability in his spirit lock spatial zone, as well as the stone bowl placed on the stone pillar carvings. However, the container on the dimensional hub was much larger than the stone bowl in the spirit lock spatial zone. After taking a closer look, Lin Yuan found that there were 9 source-type items and an unknown rainbow ball of light in the container on the dimensional hub in front of him. Lu Jie heaved a sigh of relief when he arrived at the location of the dimensional hub. I finally made it in time. There are actually 9 source-type items inside. But even if there are 9 source-type items, logically speaking, a Class 5-dimensional rift shouldn't have opened. While speaking, Lu Jie also focused his gaze on the rainbow ball of light. After seeing the rainbow ball of light, Lu Jie's expression suddenly froze, and he said with some uncertainty, "Rainbow? Could this be a sacred source life form?" Upon hearing Lu Jie mention the sacred source life form, Lin Yuan's eyes fiercely stared at the rainbow ball of light. Lin Yuan had heard his master, the Moon Empress, and the mother of Bloodbath mention sacred source life forms more than once. However, now that Lu Jie mentioned the sacred source life form, Lin Yuan did not have any intention of admiring the rainbow ball of light. Instead, he only felt his hair stand on end. Sacred source life forms could only be produced in Class 5-dimensional rifts, and each Class 5-dimensional rift could only produce one sacred source life form. Now, a sacred source life form had actually appeared in a Class 4-dimensional hub that was about to evolve to Class 5. This was simply a shocking conspiracy. When the dimensional rift evolved from Class 4 to Class 5, another sacred source life form was bound to descend. If that was the case, who knew to what extent the water world dimensional rift outside Indigo Azure City would develop when the energy of the 2 sacred source life forms overlapped? Just as he was about to activate the extreme token in the flowing cloud pendant hanging on his chest, Lin Yuan saw a hazy shadow not far from him through the mask that Genius had transformed into. The first one was even worse. Sob, sob, sob. The next chapter was pure dry goods. One of Lin Yuan's phase was about to undergo a qualitative change, which was more interesting to watch. Evolving phase or trading phase. End of this chapter. Chapter 5:10. Lin Yuan immediately turned his head and carefully looked at the empty space where he had vaguely seen a hazy shadow. However, when he looked at it again, he found that the hazy shadow he had vaguely seen before had disappeared. After checking for a while to no avail, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. He took a deep breath and focused his attention on the dimensional hub's location. For some reason, Lu Jie, who was standing beside Lin Yuan, felt a sense of danger lingering around him. Lu Jie was very familiar with this sense of crisis. Every time he encountered danger in the wilderness, he would always have this feeling. The sense of crisis could be considered the combat intuition of a spirit chi professional after going through hundreds of battles. Now, Lu Jie felt that the sense of crisis was getting stronger and stronger. At that moment, Lu Jie suddenly recalled that Lin Yuan had just turned his head to look at an empty space not far away. He should have also felt an inexplicable sense of crisis. Lu Jie also turned around and looked toward the open space that Lin Yuan had been looking at. Lu Jie felt goosebumps all over his body when he saw it. He immediately shouted, "Defend!" Immediately after, Lu Jie commanded the 4 shield ladybugs that had landed on standby beside him to block in front of Lin Yuan. This was because Lu Jie discovered that a figure had suddenly appeared in that empty space. The figure threw a grayish-purple crystal at Lin Li. When Lin Yuan heard Lu Jie's shout for defense, he subconsciously commanded the source sand to produce a large number of feathers from the guard's sand under his feet. These feathers, which were made of the day and night spirit silver, had been altered to look like the cloud crane's gray feathers. At the same time, since the source sand had been upgraded to Fantasy 2, he had added another cubic meter of day and night spirit silver. Therefore, when the feathers formed the 4 wings, they appeared more agile and elegant than the previous wings, and also appeared to be denser. At this moment, the 4 shield ladybugs had already collided with the purplish-gray crystal that was flying over. After colliding with the 4 shield ladybugs, the purplish-gray crystal directly exploded, rippling a terrifying energy wave. Upon seeing that, Lu Jie did not hesitate at all. He instinctively took his insect queen, which had returned to its demon form, and pounced toward Lin Yuan. Each of Lin Yuan's wings was close to 3 meters long. Lin Yuan instinctively protected Lu Jie under the 4 wings formed by the day and night spirit silver. Then he poured spiritual power into the 4 wings formed by the day and night spirit silver. The wings, which were originally black and seemed to be able to absorb light, instantly turned sparkling white. Lu Jie was currently facing Lin Yuan. When he saw Lin Yuan take a deep breath, a heartfelt smile appeared on his face. She said softly to Lin Yuan, "Lin Yuan, I made an appointment with you and when you. I'm going to be absent on the grass 10 years later." Before Lin Yuan could say anything, Lu Jie had already turned around and reached out to caress the insect queen lovingly. Then he shouted at the insect queen, "Transform into a manufacturing form. Use insect swarm frenzy on the main body." Following Lu Jie's instructions, the insect queen instantly expanded. However, the base that the insect queen had transformed into was only 2 meters tall. The insect queen's body that had transformed into the base was still burning with a layer of energy flames formed by the energy recovered from the explosion of the entire insect swarm. The insect queen was also resolutely carrying out Lu Jie's orders. A layer of red halo immediately appeared on the insect queen's body after it used insect swarm frenzy on itself. Lin Yuan could already feel how massive the grayish-purple energy that bombarded his 4 wings formed by the day and night spirit silver was. In just an instant, the day and night spirit silver, which was an extremely sturdy gold spiritual material, was blasted into pieces by this grayish-purple energy. Immediately after, the grayish-purple energy bombarded the insect queen's base. Since the 4 wings formed by the day and night spirit silver had been blasted into pieces by this energy wave, Lin Yuan was completely exposed to the air. Lu Jie, who was blocking in front of Lin Yuan, used all the strength in his body to push Lin Yuan away with a backhand. Then, the grayish-purple energy blasted a huge hole in the insect queen's insect tribe base. At the same time, this spreading grayish-purple energy also blasted Lu Jie, who was still in the position of pushing Lin Yuan away, behind the insect queen. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Lu Jie did not even have time to say more to Lin Yuan before he was already hit by this grayish-purple energy. However, Lu Jie had already expressed all the words he wanted to say with his actions. Lin Yuan was pushed nearly 10 meters away by Lu Jie and fell miserably on the boiling sea of sand. Lin Yuan stood up and immediately dashed to Lu Jie's side. Upon seeing Lu Jie and the insect queen's current state, Lin Yuan only felt a rush of hot blood directly to his brain. Lin Yuan's eyes instantly turned red. The insect queen had now turned into the fist-sized purple flesh cocoon that Lin Yuan had first seen. However, there was a hole on this purple flesh cocoon, and a large amount of purplish-gray thick water flowed out of the hole. Lu Jie's entire body had been blasted by this purplish-gray energy until only his torso was left. Half of his torso was also incomplete. Like the insect queen, a large amount of purplish-gray thick water flowed out of the wound on Lu Jie's incomplete body. Obviously, the grayish-purple energy attack just now contained a terrifying poison. At that moment, the gray figure in the distance, which had just appeared, had a satisfied expression on his face. It was as though he had just finished watching a movie and was walking over gracefully. His gray eyes looked at Lin Yuan and Lu Jie, who had fallen on the ground, and he smacked his lips. What a touching and moving brotherhood. This moment should be accompanied by a glass of wine to savor. You're obviously not very strong, but you barely survived the attack of a major-grade Fey. Congratulations. However, you won't be so lucky next, because your end has come. After saying that, the gray-haired, gray-eyed man waved his hand and summoned a giant dog with 3 ferocious heads. The moment the 3-headed dog appeared, it let out 3 deafening roars. The gray-haired, gray-eyed man said to himself, "At first, I was still afraid that I was not strong enough, but now it seems that I, Hunting Ashes, am destined to complete Lord 7th Page War's decree." Lin Yuan did not care about the gray-haired, gray-eyed man or the 3-headed giant dog that the gray-haired, gray-eyed man had summoned. Lin Yuan's eyes seemed to be seeping blood. He waved his hand and summoned the jasmine lily. Then, he removed the vitality imprint on his forehead that stored a large amount of vitality energy. At the same time, he activated the extreme token that the Moon Empress had given him. The 2nd cycle. My body is almost recovered. The 3rd cycle will start next Monday. End of this chapter. Chapter 511. When the extreme token on Lin Yuan's chest was activated by the spiritual power, it seemed to turn into a full moon that hung in front of Lin Yuan's chest and emitted gentle moonlight. The moonlight was like water, shining on Lin Yuan's body as though it could seep into his heart. The gray-haired, gray-eyed man's expression changed when he saw the gentle moonlight rising from Lin Yuan's chest. He suddenly had a feeling that everything would eventually fuse into this moonlight and never wither. However, after this moonlight, which carried light smoke and was not tainted by a speck of dust, left Lin Yuan's chest, it instantly lost its original gentleness. In an instant, the mountains and rivers changed color. With Lin Yuan's body as the origin, it was as though a waterfall of moonlight that connected heaven and earth had risen from Lin Yuan's chest. The moonlight was like a waterfall that illuminated the sky. It had an unparalleled majesty and dominance. The waterfall of moonlight spiraled in the sky and instantly condensed into a bright moon. At that moment, the world in the evolving dimensional rift seemed to have been taken over by this bright moon that was releasing moonlight brilliance in the sky the moment this bright moon condensed. The bright moon rippled, and the clear brilliance that emerged from the ripples condensed into thousands of moonlight satin. The silk-like cold moonlight poured down from the bright moon, not giving the gray-haired, gray-eyed man and the fantasy breed Cerberus any time to react. The gray-haired, gray-eyed man and the fantasy breed Cerberus were sublimated into nothingness under this moonlight. Lin Yuan looked at the scene of heaven and earth changing color after he activated the extreme token and could not help but be a little shocked. Not only were the gray-haired, gray-eyed man and the fantasy breed Cerberus instantly obliterated by the moonlight. Even the solid dimensional barrier at the hub of the dimensional rift, which was formed during the evolving dimensional rift, was constantly sublimated under this moonlight. Under the illumination of the moonlight, it continued to sublimate and thin at a speed visible to the naked eye. This was under the situation where the moonlight did not target the dimensional barrier. This made Lin Yuan very surprised at the Moon Empress' strength. Lin Yuan could not help but sigh. It turned out that the Moon Empress was actually so powerful. Just by looking at the gray-haired, gray-eyed man's sneak attack, Lin Yuan knew that the gray-haired, gray-eyed man did not belong to the Radiance Federation. Lin Yuan also firmly remembered the 7th Page War that the gray-haired, gray-eyed man had mentioned, as well as his strange name or address, Hunting Ashes. He did not know who 7th Page War and Hunting Ashes were referring to. However, if he could get out and bring this news to his master, the Moon Empress, he wouldn't be able to do so. With the Moon Empress knowledge, it was very likely that she knew what kind of faction was plotting all of this. But at that moment, apart from placing a portion of his attention on the Dimensional Rift's hub, he was waiting for the Dimensional Rift's barrier to disappear under the moonlight. He placed all his remaining attention on Lu Jie. The vitality from the vitality imprint on Lin Yuan's forehead was constantly pouring into Lu Jie's body through the jasmine lily. However, during the healing process, he realized that given his jasmine lily's current grade, even if he used up the huge amount of energy in the vitality imprint, the jasmine lily would not be able to withstand it. At most, it would only be able to keep Lu Jie alive for a while and not let him die immediately. While Lin Yuan was using the jasmine lily to keep Lu Jie alive, he found that the purplish-gray toxin-infected wound on Lu Jie's incomplete torso was oozing more and more pus. The purplish-gray toxin was spreading rapidly, and even Lu Jie's cheeks were now stained with a layer of purplish-gray. Lin Yuan walked in front of Lu Jie and smelled the pus and blood oozing out of Lu Jie's wound. He suddenly felt a tingling sensation in his spirit. Lin Yuan could not help but hold his breath. When Lin Yuan saw the pus constantly oozing out of Lu Jie's wound, he initially thought that the purplish-gray toxin was a toxin that was extremely destructive to flesh and blood. However, he did not expect that the purplish-gray toxin's true effect was not only a flesh and blood toxin that was extremely destructive to flesh and blood, but it was also a spiritual toxin that caused great damage to the spirit. Lin Yuan hurriedly let all the jasmine lily's flower heads head toward Lu Jie's head and injected a huge amount of vitality as quickly as possible. He wanted to try and see if he could use the huge amount of vitality to dispel the purplish-gray spiritual toxin. Even if he could not, he had to protect Lu Jie's brain and suppress the purplish-gray spiritual toxin from spreading to Lu Jie's brain. Otherwise, even if he could keep Lu Jie alive, after his spirit was destroyed, he would become a vegetable without even an ordinary consciousness. However, Lin Yuan immediately found that even if the jasmine lily sped up the speed of the vitality pouring into Lu Jie's body, it did suppress the spread of the purplish-gray spiritual toxin in Lu Jie's body. At the same time, the huge amount of vitality seemed to be nourishing the purplish-gray toxin. This made the purplish-gray toxin more active in the parts that had already spread to, preventing Lu Jie's physical recovery. Originally, after Lu Jie was injured and the purplish-gray toxin entered his body, he felt that his spirit was constantly experiencing an unbearable death by 1,000 cuts. The sharp pain in his spirit made Lu Jie completely unable to feel the pain from his body. During this process, Lu Jie's spiritual power became weaker and weaker, and his thoughts became more and more chaotic. He even faintly felt that his spirit had been cut off from the insect queen. However, with all the jasmine lily's flower heads pouring vitality together, Lu Jie's chaotic spirit seemed to have suddenly regained a trace of clarity. Lu Jie could faintly see Lin Yuan standing beside him and healing him. However, the more Lu Jie wanted to see the scene in front of him clearly, the more he could not see clearly due to the severe pain. Lu Jie wanted to open his mouth to speak, but he found that his jaw seemed to have been dislocated in the explosion. He could not open his teeth and spit out even a word. Lu Jie forced himself to stay awake and finally confirmed that it was indeed Lin Yuan standing beside him. The painful expression on Lu Jie's face suddenly revealed a relaxed smile. Lu Jie wanted to reach out to touch the Class 2 Creation Master's retainer crest on his chest, but he found that his spirit had started to become a little chaotic again. At the last moment, Lu Jie used all his strength but found that he still could not feel the familiar touch of the Class 2 Creation Master's retainer crest on his chest. Perhaps due to the severe pain in his spirit, Lu Jie did not realize that he had lost his arms and legs. The jasmine lily's boundless life energy continued to infuse Lu Jie's body with the stubborn purplish-gray spiritual poison. It continued to damage Lu Jie's already infected body. Just as Lin Yuan was about to despair, his eyes suddenly lit up. It was as though he had found the hope of new life in a desperate situation. First update. I'll update Lu Jie's version settings. End of this chapter. Chapter 5:12. Lin Yuan suddenly thought of the huge jar of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar that his master had given him. The silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar could recover damaged origin and wash away impurities on the body. The purplish-gray poison had already fused with Lu Jie's body. This foreign harmful substance had obviously become a part of his body's impurities. At that thought, Lin Yuan immediately took action. He took out the jar of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar from the amber button-shaped diamond fey storage box. After taking out the big jar of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar, he immediately took out the big bowl that he had used to consume the nectar. Lin Yuan filled the bowl with the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar and looked at Lu Jie's pained face under the purplish-gray poison's torture. Lin Yuan's heart tightened even more. Just as he was about to open Lu Jie's mouth, he found that Lu Jie's jaw had been dislocated. Lin Yuan's hand pushed up forcefully, and with a click, Lu Jie's dislocated jaw was put back in place. He slowly poured the bowl full of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar into Lu Jie's mouth. After finishing the bowl, he immediately tore off a piece of cloth from his moon-white spirit chi clothes. She rolled the cloth into a roll and fed it to Lu Jie. Lu Jie had experienced the pain of the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar removing its impurities. Moreover, Lu Jie's body was still wreaking havoc with the purplish-gray poison. When the two kinds of pain overlapped, Lin Yuan was really afraid that Lu Jie would accidentally bite his tongue while enduring it. Soon, the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar began to take effect in Lu Jie's body. However, the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar's expression became even more painful. The silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar replenished Lu Jie's stamina, giving him the strength to struggle. Lu Jie's miserable struggle in a delirious state made Lin Yuan's eyes turn scarlet. Lin Yuan gritted his teeth and forced himself to calm down to check on Lu Jie's condition after consuming the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar. Soon, he realized that the purplish-gray poison was no match for the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar. As Lu Jie struggled violently, the purplish-gray poison turned into thick liquid and flowed out of his wound. At the same time, with the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar's ability to remove impurities, Lu Jie's remaining torso secreted a large amount of filth. Lin Yuan was pleasantly surprised. The current situation proved that the purplish-gray poison had been completely removed from Lu Jie's body by the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar. As for Lu Jie, he immediately fainted after the purplish-gray poison was removed from his body. He could finally let the jasmine lily use its exclusive skill, severed connection, to restore Lu Jie's damaged body in the explosion. However, the jasmine lily's current strength was still insufficient. With the jasmine lily's silver eye/fantasy eye strength, it wasn't enough to heal Lu Jie's severely damaged body. However, this was not an unsolvable problem for Lin Yuan. He was extremely glad that he had used Morbius' exclusive skill, the Pure Land of Bliss, to absorb the cold snow pine's world grace. He did not immediately use up the condensed spirit crystals. Instead, he kept them. He let the jasmine lily continue to supply vitality to keep Lu Jie alive. Then, he entered his spirit lock spatial zone under the moonlight. After he entered the spirit lock spatial zone, the wind speed rapid antelope quickly ran to his side. However, Lin Yuan did not have time to interact with the wind speed rapid antelope. When the wind speed rapid antelope saw that Lin Yuan ignored it, it was not disappointed. He was like a little follower, following closely behind Lin Yuan. Perhaps the wind speed rapid antelope sensed the anxious and serious expression on Lin Yuan's face, so it slowed down when it walked. It did not hop and hop as usual and tiptoed forward. Lin Yuan walked to the side of the spirit pool and grabbed the sea burial lotus flower, which was frantically devouring the pure spirit chi in the spirit lock spatial zone. After Lin Yuan's previous training, the sea burial lotus flower still remembered him. However, just as it was about to shake its flower branch and greet this enemy who had given it such a good living environment, Lin Yuan destroyed the flower. Lin Yuan had already ruthlessly ripped off the sea burial lotus flower's condensed sobbing sea crystals at its roots. The sea burial lotus flower's grade instantly dropped to normal eye/normal after having its sobbing sea crystal removed. Lin Yuan continued to nurture the sea burial lotus flower, which had fallen to normal eye/normal, in the spirit pool. With the pure and rich spirit chi in the spirit lock spatial zone, Lin Yuan knew that his actions would not affect the sea burial lotus flower's roots. Lin Yuan also took out the spirit chi crystals that he had not had time to count. After giving Gray 30 crystals, there were roughly 270 left. Then he exited the spirit lock spatial zone. Lin Yuan was prepared to use the sobbing sea crystals that the sea burial lotus flower had condensed after squeezing out a sea region and the remaining 270 spirit chi crystals to raise the jasmine lily's grade to the maximum. Then he would use the upgraded jasmine lily to heal Lu Jie's incomplete body. Lin Yuan did not dare to guarantee that the upgraded jasmine lily would definitely be able to heal Lu Jie. After all, with Lu Jie's current injuries, no one would be able to do anything if they were in his place. Lu Jie's weight of 75 kilograms had now been blasted to less than 75 kilograms. Even with the jasmine lily's exclusive skill, severed life, Lin Yuan still did not dare to guarantee such injuries. However, with this sea burial lotus flower, Lin Yuan was confident that he could raise the jasmine lily's grade from Fantasy I to Fantasy 3. When a Fantasy breed phase grade reached Fantasy 3, it would inevitably undergo a metamorphosis. Moreover, when the jasmine lily's grade rose from silver, it was very likely that it would mutate. This made the jasmine lily's healing ability very likely to increase by several times. Lin Yuan was not in a hurry to let the jasmine lily use the sea burial lotus flower. Instead, he took out 9 spirit chi crystals and raised the jasmine lily's grade from silver I to silver X. Immediately after, he took out 10 spirit chi crystals and crushed them without even blinking. He let the silver X/Fantasy I jasmine lily absorb this huge amount of pure spiritual energy. During this process, the jasmine lily's body suddenly lit up with a dazzling emerald green luster. Emerald green lusters of different colors flickered on the strange flower petals, causing the entire jasmine lily to instantly rise with an emerald haze. As the emerald color of the strange flower flickered, it was as if all the emerald color was being transferred to the huge jasmine lily flower at the top that had not undergone the fasciation. The second update. There will be another update later. If everyone is tired, don't wait anymore. It might be very late. End of this chapter. Chapter 5:13. With a loud bang, the jasmine lily's main flower, which had yet to undergo fasciation, suddenly lit up with a luster amidst the rich emerald color. Lin Yuan looked over and found that the jasmine lily's huge flower, which had yet to undergo fasciation, actually had many fine crystal threads growing on it. These fine crystal threads gathered together and constantly intertwined and fused, finally seeming to become a complete crystal. Lin Yuan knew that this was due to the jasmine lily's crystallization during its promotion to gold. The jasmine lily's main flower, which had yet to undergo fasciation, seemed to have turned into a piece of rich emerald crystal. There seemed to be a few dark green flashes in the rich emerald crystal. As the crystallized main flower spun, the dark green luster only flashed once in a moment and was not obvious. However, the color contained in it was more dazzling than the entire crystallized emerald flower. At that moment, the jasmine lily's grade had risen from silver X/Fantasy I to gold I/Fantasy I. As Morbius Spirit Lock Healing Type Fey, the jasmine lily's grade was already the same as Lin Yuan's current main Fey, the Source Sand. Lin Yuan looked at the jasmine lily, which had advanced to gold, and sighed. It had to be said that it was a complete miracle that his jasmine lily could grow to its current appearance. An ordinary jasmine lily had undergone a rare group mutation among succulents and a rare fasciation mutation. Only high-grade succulents had a very small chance of undergoing a crystallization mutation. Lin Yuan did not know whether he should say that it was his fortune or the jasmine lily's fortune. Now that the gold/fantasy jasmine lily's appearance was out, probably no one would think that it was a jasmine lily. The jasmine lily's crystallized main flower released a healing light beam that faintly carried a mottled dark green luster. He could clearly feel that the jasmine lily's crystallized main flower's healing ability, heal, was more than 10 times stronger than before. With such a healing ability and the boundless supply of life energy, Lu Jie's broken body began to slowly grow 4 limbs. However, although the limbs were slowly growing, Lu Jie's broken body did not show any signs of rebirth. Lu Jie's broken torso was not the most difficult problem that Lin Yuan was facing now. The most difficult problem was the 5 organs in Lu Jie's body that had been shattered in the purplish-gray energy explosion just now. Lin Yuan took another deep breath and began to work on the jasmine lily's evolution. 10 spirit chi crystals seemed to be free as Lin Yuan invested them into the evolved gold-eye jasmine lily. The jasmine lily's grade was also constantly increasing under the pouring of the spirit chi crystals. Gold 2. Gold rank level 3. It rose all the way to Gold X. Lin Yuan had spent a total of 90 spirit chi crystals. The moment the jasmine lily reached Gold X, Lin Yuan threw the sobbing sea crystal at its crystallized main flower. The jasmine crystal that jasmine was, the crystal was 2 and gold. The spirit chi tornado and sobbing sea crystals caused by the shattering of 100 spirit chi crystals allowed the jasmine lily to evolve again. During the jasmine lily's evolution process, apart from anticipation, Lin Yuan was also filled with endless apprehension. If the jasmine lily was still unable to heal Lu Jie after this evolution, Lin Yuan would no longer have any other means. Then Lin Yuan would no longer have any other means, and Lu Jie would really be finished. Lin Yuan suddenly recalled what Lu Jie had said when he had helped him block the purplish-gray energy that should have hit him. Lin Yuan, I've made an appointment with you and I'm going to be absent on the grass 10 years later. Lin Yuan's thoughts went back to one evening when the mansion had just been built. It had been late autumn on the mansion's grass. At that time, endless summer and Hu Quan had yet to join the mansion, and the mother of Bloodbath had yet to transform into a human form. At that time, he, Lu Jie, and Wen Yu had been enjoying the evening breeze on the grass, eating barbecue, and drinking wine. That cup of ale was the first time Lin Yuan had drunk wine in this life. Lin Yuan could not drink much in his previous life, and his face would immediately turn red after drinking a little wine. In this life, Lin Yuan found that he was still the same. After getting a little tipsy, Lin Yuan remembered sighing at that time. I hope everyone can still sit together on this grass 10 years later, enjoy the evening breeze, raise wine glasses, and talk about ideals. Lu Jie remembered what he had said casually. At that moment, Lin Yuan's eyes were red as he looked at Lu Jie, who had fallen asleep. He said softly, "None of us are allowed to be absent on that grass 10 years later." All of a sudden, the emerald haze that had risen from the jasmine lily, which had been evolving steadily, suddenly turned into a magnificent red. Lin Yuan hurriedly looked over and found that after the magnificent red light disappeared, the jasmine lily had changed drastically again. Even Lin Yuan did not dare to recognize it. At that moment, the jasmine lily's small body had shrunk to more than half its original size. Lin Yuan held the evolved jasmine lily in his hand and found that the size of the jasmine lily was now extremely suitable for him to carry. It was no longer like before, where it felt like he was holding 2 basketballs. However, if the current jasmine lily was not his contracted fae, even as a creation master, Lin Yuan would not think that it was a jasmine lily. At that moment, the jasmine lily's fasciated part had turned dark red, and its shape had been compressed into a vague square. It looked like a square flower bed with many strange flower carvings. On top of the flower bed was a crimson crystal-shaped flower that was the size of a bowl and abnormally bright. However, this crystal-shaped flower had a blood-red luster, and it looked extremely bewitching. On top of the bewitching crimson crystal-shaped flower, there was a long tassel that was about 15 centimeters long, and there was a small emerald flower bud on the tassel. A long, dark green stamen extended out of the small emerald flower bud. Lin Yuan found that no matter how he looked at the evolved jasmine lily, he felt that this small flower bud and the long stamen that extended out of the flower bud were the main body of the entire jasmine lily. Just this small flower bud that was not even the size of a pinky finger had a verdant feeling that far surpassed all of the jasmine lily's shimmering emerald colors when it had been at Gold X. Tips and updates for not being able to draw well. Seeking monthly votes and recommendation votes. Guess the changes to the evolved jasmine lily's abilities. Welcome to the Book Friends group in the book introduction. End of this chapter. Chapter 5:14. Ordinary people would not be able to recognize the jasmine lily when it had evolved into a gold/fantasy breed. However, some Class 4 and Class 5 scholars could still discover the jasmine lily's essence after investigation. However, Class 4 scholars could no longer see through the essence of the evolved jasmine lily. Even Class 5 scholars would not be able to carefully study the jasmine lily in its current state for a few days. No matter what, they would not be able to guess that the thing in front of them had evolved from a jasmine lily. Lin Yuan hurriedly used Morbius True Data to check the evolved jasmine lily's attributes. Normal Spirit Lock. Jasmine Lily, Bud of Mountain Jade Platinum I/Fantasy III ability. Heal. Sad Face Fasciated Flower Stand. When used by the Fasciated Flower Stand, it will heal the target in reverse and absorb the target's vitality. At the same time, it will let the target enter an extremely comfortable feeling. Crystallized Mainflower. When used by the Crystallized Mainflower, it will heal the target in reverse and absorb a large amount of vitality in a short time. Bud of Mountain Jade. When used by the Bud of Mountain Jade, it will heal the target in a positive direction. Rich vitality will be injected into the target's body through the Bud of Mountain Jade, helping the target recover damaged vitality. Exclusive Skill Frowny Face Recovery Imprint. Stores the healing energy that the jasmine lily normally releases. The contractor can activate the imprint to release the stored healing energy. Severed Growth. Comprehend the mystery of plant growth. Even if the genetic model is damaged, the rich vitality can slowly continue to grow. After checking, Lin Yuan felt that his eyeballs almost popped out and fell to the ground. He hurriedly stopped using the jasmine lily's fasciated flower stand and blood-red crystallized Mainflower to continue using Heal on Lugia. If the fasciated flower stand and crystallized Mainflower continued to heal Lugia, it would be him harming Lugia. Lin Yuan couldn't figure out what went wrong no matter how hard he tried. Could it be because of the Sea Burial Lotus Flower's Sobbing Sea Crystal? The Sea Burial Lotus Flower had condensed the Sobbing Sea Crystal after stripping the entire ocean of vitality. After using the Sobbing Sea Crystal to upgrade its quality, the jasmine lily had also assimilated a part of the Sea Burial Lotus Flower's characteristics. Could it have fused with Heal? This was the first time Lin Yuan had heard of something like reverse healing. In that case, wouldn't my jasmine lily turn from a big blood bag that only knows how to donate blood into a vampire? Furthermore, the jasmine lily was now an indecent vampire. For any life form, absorbing their life energy was an extremely cruel method of harming them. If the crystallized Mainflower used Heal to directly absorb a large amount of the target's life energy, it would be considered normal. However, when the fasciated flower terrace absorbed the target's life energy, it retained the extreme pleasure of healing the target. Sucking your blood and making you feel especially comfortable, this is what a considerate little cotton-padded jacket should do. God damn it! The direction of his affinity was towards healing and support. Why has the jasmine lily, a proper healing fae, become so reckless? At that moment, Lin Yuan actually did not have the face to activate the Iron Bucket Sister nurturing plan again. However, he had to swear to the heavens that he had never thought of letting the jasmine lily be so reckless. Thanks to True Data, the jasmine lily's name had changed from Jasmine Lily to Jasmine Lily Bud of Mountain Jade. Moreover, it had been upgraded to Platinum I/Fantasy III. The Spirit Chi crystals that Lin Yuan had saved from Morbius' exclusive skill, Pure Land of Bliss, to absorb the cold Snow Pines World Grace, had been consumed during the jasmine lily's evolution. A total of 199 Spirit Chi crystals and an entire piece of Sea Burial Lotus Flower had been consumed to upgrade the jasmine lily from Silver I/Fantasy I to Platinum I/Fantasy III. Now, Lin Yuan only had 71 Spirit Chi crystals left. In order to heal Lugia, Lin Yuan had chosen to upgrade his only healing fae, the jasmine lily. It was tantamount to giving up a good opportunity to use so many Spirit Chi crystals to enhance his combat ability. Unexpectedly, the jasmine lily, which was originally the most well-behaved, had suddenly become reckless. It had changed from a proper healing type fae to a big needle that could suck milk. If the Gold I/Fantasy II Source Sand had given him platinum combat power and the capital to fight in the Radiance 100 sequence battle, then the Gold I/Fantasy II Source Sand had given him the combat power of platinum and the capital to fight in the Radiance 100 sequence. Now, apart from the Radiance 100 sequence competition, this Platinum I/Fantasy III Jasmine Lily would allow Lin Yuan to have a stable foothold in the Radiance 100 sequence. It could be said that in a real battle, the Platinum I/Fantasy 3 Jasmine Lily would directly surpass the Source Sand and become Lin Yuan's main combat fae. As a healing-type spirit chi professional with a Platinum/Fantasy breed healing-type fae, Lin Yuan would be in high demand wherever he went. In fact, in Lin Yuan's opinion, the Platinum I/Fantasy 3 Jasmine Lily, Bud of Mountain Jade, was a little strange no matter how he looked at it. The Jasmine Lily's original part had turned from a vibrant green to a blood-like red, giving up its healing ability. However, at the same time, a bud of Mountain Jade bloomed at the top. The bud of Mountain Jade had perfectly inherited the Jasmine Lily's original healing ability. This was equivalent to the Jasmine Lily having an additional attack ability out of thin air. With that thought, Lin Yuan suddenly felt that the Jasmine Lily was reckless. Reckless was wonderful. Reckless croak. So what if it was a healing-type fae? A healing-type fae should be reckless. Anyway, it could still be healed. It would draw your blood and return my blood. I don't care if you feel good or not, I'll feel good anyway. Moreover, with the fasciated flower stand, it wouldn't do even if you felt bad. Time was tight, so Lin Yuan didn't check the Jasmine Lily, Bud of Mountain Jade, that had just evolved into a Platinum I/Fantasy 3 Jasmine Lily. Instead, he let the Bud of Mountain Jade at the top of the Jasmine Lily's crystal-like main flower perform heal on Wuxia. Then, Lin Yuan injected the majestic vitality from the vitality imprint into the Bud of Mountain Jade at the top of the Jasmine Lily. The emerald flower bud on the Jasmine Lily's blood-red crystal flower sprayed out a mist of life energy that resembled a mist. The continuous vitality energy mist landed on Wuxia's body, and his broken body quickly recovered in the energy mist. First chapter. End of this chapter. Chapter 5:15. Wuxia's broken body began to slowly recover in the mist of vitality that the Bud of Mountain Jade sprayed. Lin Yuan's face immediately lit up. Then he closed his eyes and carefully sensed the current condition of Wuxia's body. As the vitality released by the Bud of Mountain Jade wandered in Wuxia's body, Lin Yuan could feel the mist of vitality making Wuxia's broken organs in his chest grow back together. After feeling all this, the big stone in Lin Yuan's heart was finally put down. However, the recovery speed of Wuxia's broken body in the mist of vitality was a little too slow. Lin Yuan looked at the dimensional hub in the distance, which was eroded by the moonlight, with only a thin layer of the spatial barrier left. Lin Yuan knew that if he continued to treat Wuxia so slowly, he would not have enough time. Lin Yuan tried to inject all the vitality in the vitality imprint on his forehead into the Bud of Mountain Jade at the top of the Jasmine Lily. The vitality in Lin Yuan's vitality imprint had been accumulated when the Jasmine Lily had been at Silver I/Fantasy I. The Jasmine Lily was now at Platinum I/Fantasy 3. Therefore, the Bud of Mountain Jade received all the vitality that Lin Yuan had poured into it. The tiny Bud of Mountain Jade growing on the long tassel began to tremble violently after receiving the tremendous amount of life energy. At that moment, the dark green stamen that stretched out of the Bud of Mountain Jade rippled gently. The gentle ripples produced dark green ripples filled with dense vitality. These ripples eventually condensed into a dark green water droplet. When Lin Yuan saw the dark green water formed by the dark green stamen sticking out of the Bud of Mountain Jade, he suddenly had a thought. If life could be described with color, then it must be this dark green color in front of him. This dark green water droplet contained all the vitality in the vitality imprint on Lin Yuan's forehead. The vitality imprint on Lin Yuan's forehead was now empty. This drop of dark green water droplet landed on Wuxia's body and immediately produced layers of emerald ripples. It was like a layer of emerald-like cocoon that wrapped Wuxia's entire body. Soon, the emerald cocoon of light shattered, revealing Wuxia lying on the ground, looking as good as new. Lin Yuan knew that Wuxia's spirit had been on the verge of collapse due to the impact of the purplish-gray mental toxin and the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar. Lin Yuan did not have any phase that could effectively treat mental injuries. Lin Yuan grabbed a handful of cinnabar sweet osmanthus petals from the spirit lock spatial zone, crushed them, put them in Wuxia's mouth, and helped him swallow them with water. After that, he used Morbius' calm heart skill on Lugia. It could be said that he had done his best to save Lugia. It could even be said that he had taken a considerable risk. As a C-rank spirit chi professional, Lin Yuan could only control fays that were at most Gold X/Fantasy breed. Lin Yuan had only made a bold attempt because the Gold/Fantasy breed Jasmine Lily could not heal Lugia. He had come up with this idea because he had heard from his master, the Moon Empress, that when some top factions nurtured their juniors, they would use the rolling tier method. He would use the rolling grade method to allow his juniors' contracted phase to break through the highest grade that a spirit chi professional could contract. It was said that it required a rare fae called the Starlight Wisdom Cloud, as well as a lot of other things. It was not worth it to spend so much money to only allow a fae that could be controlled by one person to break through a small grade limit. However, the reason those top factions would do this was that this small grade was enough to enhance their juniors' individual strength. While fighting for more honor, it would also allow their juniors to have more means to protect themselves. It could be said that as long as there was a rolling tier phenomenon in the younger generation's contracted phase, it meant that they had an extraordinary background. Of course, the Moon Empress did not go into detail about the details, so Lin Yuan did not know much. But come to think of it, the crux of this was undoubtedly related to the level of mental strength. After a fae reached platinum, its intelligence would be greatly enhanced, and its spiritual energy would also increase by several times. As a result, for spirit chi professionals who had yet to reach B rank, contracting a platinum fae would be a huge burden on their spiritual energy. In fact, the spirit chi professionals' spiritual energy would be suppressed by their contracted phase. If this really happened, the spirit chi professionals might have a mental breakdown, which was permanent spiritual damage. However, as a fae with Morbius spirit lock, the Jasmine Lily was spiritually connected to Morbius. Even if it was a rolling tier, it would not have a huge impact on Lin Yuan. At most, Lin Yuan's spiritual energy would fall into a state of fatigue after controlling the platinum/fantasy breed Jasmine Lily. After communicating with Morbius, Lin Yuan decisively chose to let the Jasmine Lily undergo the rolling tier. Therefore, Lin Yuan could control a platinum/fantasy breed fae as a C-rank spirit chi professional. Fortunately, Lin Yuan's efforts and risks were not in vain. After Lin Yuan healed Lu Jie, he could not be bothered to catch his breath. He quickly carried the insect queen, which had turned into a purple flesh cocoon, over and placed it beside Lu Jie. At that moment, the thick liquid that flowed out of the hole on the insect queen's purple flesh cocoon was no longer purplish-gray. Instead, it was faintly black. Under Lin Yuan's observation, the purplish-gray toxin had spread to the insect queen's entire body, causing the insect queen's purple flesh cocoon to look abnormally dim. The insect queen's current situation could be said to be urgent. Lin Yuan was a creation master, so he could clearly sense the insect queen's current state. The insect queen was originally a fairy-like spiritual-type source-type life form. At that moment, the purplish-gray toxin had started to corrode and destroy the insect queen's spirit, causing great damage to it. The insect queen was Lu Jie's only contracted fae. If anything happened to the insect queen, even if Lin Yuan allowed Lu Jie to fully recover, Lu Jie would still return to his muddle-headed state before he met Lin Yuan. In the future, Lu Jie would return to the muddle-headed state he was in before they met, and it might even get worse. After all, the insect queen had been in a critical state at that time, and there was always a trace of possibility of recovery. Now, the insect queen was indeed on the verge of death. Lin Yuan scooped out a bowl of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar from the opening of the jar. Through the hole on the insect queen's body, he slowly poured the bowl of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar into the insect queen's body. The second chapter. There will be another chapter later, and it will be very late. Everyone can pay attention to rest, and we will continue watching tomorrow morning. End of this chapter. Chapter 5:16. As soon as the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar entered the insect queen's body, Lin Yuan immediately took a spirit chi crystal and crushed it beside the insect queen. For the insect queen to recover from its injuries, It did not need life force but a huge amount of pure spirit qi. After the insect queen absorbed the huge amount of pure spiritual qi, its body would begin to repair itself. As a platinum/fantasy breed source-type life form, the insect queen's recovery ability was extremely strong. Moreover, with the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar, it was naturally easy to expel the purplish-gray spiritual toxin. However, the next scene made Lin Yuan frown tightly. After the insect queen absorbed the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar, it did not discharge the purplish-gray spiritual toxin through the broken hole like Lu Jie had done previously. Instead, when Lin Yuan crushed the spirit qi crystal, the insect queen absorbed the dense spirit qi from the spirit qi crystal and recovered. It assimilated and absorbed the purplish-gray spiritual toxin in its body. Before Lin Yuan could think further, the insect queen's purple flesh cocoon suddenly secreted a huge amount of colloidal insect protein. After the colloidal insect protein was secreted, it immediately turned from transparent to milky white. The milky white gelatinous worm protein became harder and harder, completely wrapping the insect queen within it. Lin Yuan quickly used Morbius True Data to check on the insect queen's true data. After a glance, Lin Yuan realized that the insect queen was currently undergoing a mutation. Lin Yuan sighed. The insect queen's mutation was definitely not related to the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar. The silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar was used to remove impurities and recover damaged roots, but it did not have the ability to mutate source-type life forms. In other words, the insect queen's sudden mutation could only be related to the purplish-gray spiritual toxin. Apart from not being able to fight in sea battles, Lu Jie's insect queen's ability combination had formed a near-perfect combat system for land battles. Therefore, the insect queen's sudden mutation might not be a good thing. The mutated insect queen might very likely change Lu Jie's usual combat style. Lu Jie was a spirit qi professional who focused on commanding insect swarms on the battlefield and deploying insect swarms' resources to wage war. In terms of combat style, it could be said that he was already set. Lu Jie didn't have many phases like other spirit qi professionals. He only had the insect queen, which was a source-type life form. Therefore, even a slight change in the insect queen would have a huge impact on Lu Jie as a whole. However, Lin Yuan could only rely on his own means to save the insect queen. As for how the insect queen would mutate, Lin Yuan had no way of interfering. Whether it was a blessing or a curse, it all depended on Lu Jie's luck. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard the sound of a mirror shattering. Upon hearing this voice, Lin Yuan strode toward the evolving dimensional rift in the distance. Just as Lin Yuan was dashing toward the dimensional rift, something strange happened. The moonlight in the sky could sense Lin Yuan's aura, so it did not attack Zhou Luo and Lu Jie, who had formed a contract with him. However, under the illumination of the moonlight, the outer shell of the seven-colored ball of light in the dimensional hub was instantly sublimated into nothingness. Without the obstruction of the outer shell, the rainbow light bloomed in the dimensional hub with a hazy rainbow brilliance. Immediately after, Lin Yuan was shocked to find that the dimensional rift, which originally needed more than 10 minutes to complete its evolution to Class 5, was instantly torn open. Another ball of light emitting a hazy rainbow brilliance descended from the torn dimensional rift. Lin Yuan's expression changed drastically. At that moment, he finally confirmed what exactly that rainbow light was. Just as Lu Jie had guessed, the rainbow orb was the legendary sacred source life form. Lin Yuan had never expected that the extreme token that his master, the Moon Empress, had given him would actually be a hindrance at a critical moment. Although the moonlight had mostly suppressed the spatial fluctuations in the dimensional hub, under the illumination of the two sacred source life forms, the dimensional rift continued to tear and expand. However, under the illumination of the rainbow halos from the two sacred source life forms, the dimensional rift continued to tear and expand. Through this rift, Lin Yuan seemed to have peeped into the boundless water world on the other side of the rift. From the hub of this dimensional rift, Lin Yuan also sensed a few powerful auras about to rush out of the water world. At that moment, the water world's boundless seawater was pouring down through the torn rift. At that moment, The moonlight from the bright moon hanging high above the 9 heavens seemed to have found a target and suddenly descended. The moonlight and the vast ocean collided, and the moonlight sublimated the vast ocean that was pouring down in torrents. The moment the moonlight sublimated the ocean, Lin Yuan could feel the energy in the extreme token in his chest rapidly being consumed. At that moment, Lin Yuan finally had a direct understanding of his master's strength. This was because his master's moonlight domain was resisting the entire Class 5 water world dimensional rift. The powerful life forms in the Class 5 water world dimensional rift were immediately sublimated. Not even a drop of water could fall on the yellow sand under Lin Yuan's feet. Lin Yuan did not have any time to think and immediately reached into the dimensional hub. He had chosen to stop the dimensional rift's evolution. Zhou Luo and Lu Jie had also risked their lives to send him here. In that case, the only thing he could do now was to puff out his chest and risk his life to seize the opportunity when the moonlight was in the sublimation ocean. Before the extreme token's energy was depleted, he took out the 2 sacred source life forms that emitted a rainbow brilliance from the dimensional hub. Even if the moonlight in the sky had suppressed the dimensional energy in the dimensional hub, Lin Yuan's hand would still be able to reach the dimensional hub. However, as soon as Lin Yuan's hand reached into the dimensional hub, his entire hand immediately became a bloody mess. In an instant, Lin Yuan's hand was cut by countless dimensional ripples. Lin Yuan had already expected all of this. However, the numbness derived from the pain of being cut by so many dimensional ripples prevented Lin Yuan from feeling the pain immediately. Immediately after, the intense pain from his hand made him clench his teeth tightly. Lin Yuan's tightly clenched teeth let out creaking sounds as though his teeth were going to be crushed by his clenching. 10 fingers linked to the heart. Moreover, apart from the 10 fingers, there was also the palm, the web between the thumb and index finger, the wrist, the forearm, and the elbow. The dimensional hub's spatial energy was like a viscous swamp. Even if Lin Yuan used all his strength, his hand could only move forward bit by bit due to the huge repulsive force. All of a sudden, Lin Yuan yelled out, "Bud of Mountain Jade, heal!" Lin Yuan channeled all the remaining spirit qi in the spirit qi imprint into the jasmine lily's body. It was not because Lin Yuan was afraid that he would suffer severe injuries and was in a hurry to heal. Instead, he was afraid that if his bones were shattered by the spatial energy fluctuations, he would not be able to retrieve the 2 sacred source life forms from the dimensional hub. If that was the case, all of his previous efforts would be in vain. The yellow sand boiled. The bright moon hung high in the sky. The ocean roared. The moonlight was still the moonlight of a youth, dyed in blood and soaked in radiant light. The youth's hand faintly revealed his bones, but his eyes were still incomparably resolute. He did not stop his hand from reaching for the 2 sacred source life forms that emitted a rainbow brilliance. Tips and updates for not being able to draw well with your brush. A new month, seeking monthly votes. What? Sweet dreams, everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 517. Lin Yuan stood there, and his spine, which usually never bent, was slightly bent due to the trembling. Lin Yuan was worried that the energy in the extreme token on his chest would be quickly consumed during the process of resisting the Class 5 dimensional rift. However, he did not expect that the energy in the extreme token would not be the first to be consumed. Instead, it was the spirit qi in his spirit qi imprint. Under Lin Yuan's control, the bud of Mountain Jade was quickly releasing the heal ability on his injured arms. However, Lin Yuan had underestimated the spirit qi consumption of the Platinum I/Fantasy 3 Jasmine Lily. At the same time, he had also underestimated the severity of the injuries on his hands. The dimensional energy in the dimensional hub was like a sharp blade that bloomed on every inch of Lin Yuan's skin. Even the delicate spot between Lin Yuan's fingers was not spared from being scratched by the blade. Every time the dimensional energy fluctuation occurred, Lin Yuan's brain would receive thousands of intense pain sensations. The dimensional energy fluctuation was happening every second. This made Lin Yuan's head extremely dizzy due to the constant pain, and he was even starting to feel a little numb. What was worse was that Lin Yuan still had to endure the feeling of being hollowed out by the overdraft of spirit qi. When spirit qi professionals' bodies were hollowed out, they often had to grit their teeth and persevere just to stand. Moreover, Lin Yuan still had to endure the bone-scraping pain. The young man's determined expression was gradually covered by the yellow sand that was rising from the ground. As Lin Yuan's contracted elemental source-type life form, the source sand might not have high intelligence, but it could sense Lin Yuan's current state. The rising yellow sand was the source sand using its own method to encourage Lin Yuan. The surging yellow sand was the source sand using its own method to encourage Lin Yuan. The mask that Lin Yuan was wearing, which was transformed from cleverness, rolled off his face. The moment the silver mask rolled off, it turned into a white cat with 3 tails. Genius looked at Lin Yuan, and its blue eyes instantly turned moist. However, Genius did not dare to burrow into Lin Yuan's arms like it usually did. Instead, it jumped onto Lin Yuan's shoulder. Genius knew that if it touched Lin Yuan now, it might be the last straw that crushed Lin Yuan's will. Lin Yuan fell to the ground, wasting all his previous efforts. Due to the sense of powerlessness and the dizzying pain in his mind, he felt that his head was getting heavier and heavier as though he would fall asleep at any moment. However, Lin Yuan's thoughts were abnormally clear at that moment. Holding the world in one's hand, one's body is bright. Lin Yuan was relying on his last breath to get the 2 sacred source life forms out of the dimensional hub. However, the injuries on Lin Yuan's hands were too serious. The bud of mountain jade could not receive the supply of spirit qi from Lin Yuan's body, so it could only rely on its own heal ability to heal Lin Yuan's hands. It could no longer keep up with the speed of his injuries. In just a moment, only a thin layer of flesh was left on one of his hands. The original feeling of powerlessness and intense pain from the exhaustion of spiritual energy, coupled with the weakness of the heavy injuries on his hands due to excessive blood loss. Lin Yuan, who was extremely determined, suddenly felt that his hands were only 3 centimeters away from the 2 source-type items in the dimensional hub. It seemed to have become a natural moat. At that moment, Morbius' voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Lin Yuan, do your best. Morbius' voice echoed in Lin Yuan's spiritual spatial zone. Morbius, which was hanging on Lin Yuan's wrist, used Calm Mind on Lin Yuan. Relying on Calm Mind and this brief comfort, Lin Yuan's eyebrows suddenly emitted a wisp of stunning sharpness. Lin Yuan used all his strength to leap forward with all his might. He grabbed the 2 balls of 7-colored light with each hand, 1 in each hand. Then, using the force of the fall, Lin Yuan swept his elbow. The remaining 9 source-type items at the bottom of the dimensional hub were also swept out of the dimensional hub. Then, Lin Yuan fell straight on the yellow sand. However, the boiling quicksand was like a soft bed that carefully and gently lifted Lin Yuan, who had fallen. A deep sense of fatigue appeared between Lin Yuan's eyebrows, but he did not have time to hide that wisp of stunning sharpness. He had experienced a heart-wrenching life-and-death challenge. The sharpness between his eyebrows that was about to fade seemed to be wider than his shoulders at this moment. In the bud of mountain jade, the healing light beam continued to hit Lin Yuan's 2 injured arms. Lin Yuan immediately felt an itchy pain in his arms. Lin Yuan endured it silently. This feeling was formed precisely because new flesh was constantly growing. This meant that his injured arms were constantly recovering. Lin Yuan took a few deep breaths, but before he could enjoy true peace, he suddenly felt a pain that was completely different from his body. All of a sudden, Lin Yuan felt a pain that was completely different from his body. Furthermore, the 2 soft rainbow-colored glows in his palms had disappeared. Immediately after, Lin Yuan recovered from the intense pain. This pain was the same as when he had cleansed the impurities in his soul in the Radiant Moon Palace. After cleansing the impurities in his soul, Lin Yuan no longer had the chance to see the 2 humanoid shadows in the depths of his soul. However, Lin Yuan's consciousness returned to the depths of his soul. To Lin Yuan's horror, the 2 7-colored light balls were all gathered in one of the 2 humanoid shadows in the depths of his soul. These 2 7-colored light balls were releasing 7-colored brilliance to their heart's content. The 2 7-colored lights kept colliding inside the humanoid shadow, as though they were fighting for territory. Lin Yuan remembered what his master, the Moon Empress, had told him when she had mentioned sacred source lifeforms. When contracting a sacred source lifeform, one must have the help of many spiritual ingredients that could nourish the soul to succeed. When contracting a sacred source lifeform, one must be at least 20 years old. Otherwise, one's soul might not be strong enough and be crushed by the sacred source lifeform's energy. From the Moon Empress tone, Lin Yuan understood how precious sacred source lifeforms were. At the same time, forming a contract with one was extremely risky. Lin Yuan did not know whether he should say that he was lucky or unlucky. Lin Yuan did not expect that the way to contract sacred source lifeforms was through a blood contract. Due to the injuries on his hands, when he had grabbed the two sacred source lifeforms, he had formed a contract with them. It was such a blessing that Lin Yuan could not lose weight no matter what he did. Ordinary people would need spiritual ingredients that could nourish the soul to form a contract with a sacred source lifeform. However, he had formed a contract with two sacred source lifeforms without any spiritual ingredients. This was a disaster. Lin Yuan felt as though the soul shadow in the depths of his soul was being crushed by the two sacred source lifeforms' energy. The pain of his soul shattering was on a completely different level compared to the physical injuries he had suffered earlier. Just as the humanoid shadow in the depths of Lin Yuan's soul was on the verge of shattering, Lin Yuan's consciousness sank into darkness. At that moment, Morbius in Lin Yuan's hand lit up again. This time, however, it was not the white light that it had when it used Calm Mind. Instead, it was the reddish-gold metallic light of Morbius' body. The two sacred source lifeforms in the depths of Lin Yuan's soul shadow were still fighting, neither giving way. They were like two lions fighting for territory, both wanting to claim Lin Yuan's soul as their own to complete the contract. However, when Morbius lit up with a reddish-gold light, the two sacred source lifeforms that were radiating with rainbow light stopped in their tracks. It was as though they had sensed something abnormally terrifying, and they seemed to be abnormally fearful. The first update, the beginning of the month, rolling on the ground for monthly votes. There will be more updates later. End of this chapter. Chapter 518. The last two sacred source lifeforms found that they could not form a contract with Lin Yuan's soul projection no matter what. However, they also seemed to be afraid of Morbius' reddish-gold luster. In the end, the two sacred source lifeforms clung tightly together as if they were unwilling to do so. The moment the two sacred source lifeforms stuck together, every part of Lin Yuan's soul projection was filled with a rainbow luster. The two rainbow-colored lusters flickered, but they did not continue to deal the final blow to Lin Yuan's soul projection, which was on the verge of shattering. Instead, the two rainbow-colored lights merged into one and fused into Lin Yuan's shattered soul projection. Finally, when the rainbow luster was about to dissipate, the sacred source lifeform's original appearance was faintly revealed. After Morbius lit up with the reddish-gold luster, the entire Morbius bracelet seemed to have lost its luster. Morbius' voice sounded in Lin Yuan's mind, a little weak. Lin Yuan, I'm going to sleep for a period of time. After a pause, Morbius continued, this time, I'm going to sleep for a longer period of time. I slept much longer than the last time. Perhaps I really won't be able to wake up before advancing to a fantasy breed. However, with the new sacred source lifeform formed from the two sacred source lifeforms, I don't have to worry about sleeping. Morbius' words were very slow, as if it was both reluctant and explaining. In the end, Morbius fell completely silent. However, after Lin Yuan's consciousness fell into darkness, he did not know anything. However, within Lin Yuan's soul projection, the sacred source lifeform that had just peeled off the rainbow luster and revealed its original form seemed to have received praise from a superior and seemed to be somewhat happy. The dimensional hub that had been prevented from evolving was currently experiencing violent turbulence. Without the support of source-type items, the dimensional hub's entire space became somewhat illusory as if it was faintly dissipating. The unconscious Lin Yuan, Lu Jie, and Zhou Luo were like garbage. Just as the dimensional hub was about to dissipate, they were spat out. The black-robed woman with a veil covering her face looked at the sealed dimensional rift's entrance, and her expression became increasingly solemn. However, the black-robed woman with the veil on her face suddenly discovered that the woman in the moon-colored robe beside her had a calm expression on her face. However, the coldness and madness in his aura became more and more obvious. The black-robed woman, whose face was covered by a black veil, thought, "Not good." It was as though the moon-robed woman's emotions were more difficult to deal with than the evolving dimensional rift. "Moon Empress, you came here in advance. Do you know what faction is behind this dimensional rift?" Upon hearing that, the Moon Empress stared at the dimensional rift's entrance without blinking. She didn't even look at the black-robed woman with a veil on her face. However, there was an indescribable chill in his words. "Chief Guard Yi, this consort has been living in seclusion in Leaning Moon Mountain for 10 years. Yet you're asking this Empress which faction did this? Could it be that your brain isn't working well?" The chief guard of the spirit guards, Night Leaning Moon, immediately knew that she had said the wrong thing. How could he have forgotten the Moon Empress' true temper? The Moon Empress was a self-destructing truck. Even though the Moon Empress seemed calm, that was only on the surface. The Moon Empress' killing intent was so strong that even if her disciple did not return alive, it would not diminish even if 10 continents sank to the bottom of the sea. After the Moon Empress finished speaking, she realized that she did not receive the response she should have, and her brows immediately furrowed. However, just like before, she didn't turn to look at Night Leaning Moon. Instead, she said, "Night Leaning Moon, as the chief guard of the spirit guards, you didn't even realize that Indigo Azure City had left." At this point, the Moon Empress' voice suddenly choked. Night Leaning Moon stood in place and felt that the scene in front of her was extremely familiar. 20 years ago, when she and the Moon Empress were both Radiant's envoys, it seemed that the Moon Empress was in front while she and the other 3 bastards stood behind. She and the other 3 bastards were always reprimanded like elementary school students who had done something wrong. 20 years later, the past repeated itself, except that she now had 3 bastards by her side. The Moon Empress had said that she was here to hold down the fort, but it was better to say that she was here to vent her anger and be reprimanded. What kind of human suffering was this? However, when she heard the Moon Empress' voice suddenly choked, Night Leaning Moon, who was very familiar with the Moon Empress, suddenly raised her head. She realized that the Moon Empress' eyes were suddenly dyed with a faint red color, but Night Leaning Moon knew that this red color definitely had nothing to do with killing intent. This was because the Moon Empress' killing intent would only appear in her aura and not on her face. On normal days, it was considered a rare thing for the Moon Empress to have an expression on her face. But now, the red color in the Moon Empress' eyes reminded Night Leaning Moon of what the Moon Empress had said while looking at her hand during the Imperial Court Council. "I'm different from before. My heart is warm now." What did that mean? Night Leaning Moon took 2 steps toward the Moon Empress, but she still didn't know how to comfort her. At that moment, the Moon Empress suddenly realized that the dimensional rift entrance's restriction had disappeared. The sudden disappearance of the dimensional rift's restriction stunned the Moon Empress, who would not change her expression even if a group of mountains collapsed in front of her. Immediately afterward, the dimensional rift entrance that had suddenly removed the restriction pulled out a group of objects that seemed to have drunk black tea like diarrhea. After pulling out these objects, the dimensional rift entrance dissipated. The Moon Empress immediately saw Lin Yuan lying on the ground, covered in blood, without any signs of life. In a flash, the Moon Empress arrived at Lin Yuan's side. When she saw Lin Yuan's hands, her face was immediately filled with heartache and worry. A ray of moonlight flowed out of the Moon Empress' fingers. While sensing Lin Yuan's condition, the Moon Empress' expression changed again and again. However, after the complete examination, the Moon Empress suddenly revealed a smile on her face. This smile suddenly blossomed like a flower. After this smile, the Moon Empress seemed to have let go of all her worries and sighed. "It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back." Then, the Moon Empress turned her head and looked at the pitiful rabbit that was squatting beside her leg. The Moon Empress hugged the pitiful rabbit and said, "Cece, give me your radish." When the little rabbit heard that the Moon Empress wanted its radish, it carefully handed it over. At the same time, it extended its long ears and pointed at a piece of radish skin on the radish. At the same time, it extended its long ears and pointed at a piece of radish skin on the radish. It seemed to have made a great decision but was still somewhat reluctant. After the Moon Empress took the radish, she went to Lin Yuan's side and exerted force. There was a cracking sound as the radish was directly broken from the waist. When the little rabbit in the Moon Empress embrace heard this crisp sound, its eyes immediately turned sluggish. It was as though it had become the cry of a world-famous painting. Second chapter, begging for monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 5:19. After the Moon Empress broke the radish, she handed it to the suddenly lifeless rabbit in her arms. Then she placed the rabbit on the ground. The Moon Empress was at Lin Yuan's side and gently placed the half of the radish beside Lin Yuan's mouth before she started to circulate her spirit qi. With the help of the Moon Empress spirit qi, the radish turned into liquid and flowed into Lin Yuan's stomach. After absorbing the energy from the radish, Lin Yuan's body immediately changed. A carrot-colored energy flame rose from Lin Yuan's body. Lin Yuan's body and soul had long been broken, and his spirit had fallen into a deep sleep. However, after the radish was digested, the broken human figure in the depths of Lin Yuan's soul and his arms, which had exposed white bones, were rapidly recovering. After this half of the radish entered Lin Yuan's body, it only took a blink of an eye for his body to return to normal. However, Lin Yuan's soul and spirit were still in a deep sleep. It was like a person who had stayed up for 3 days and 3 nights and needed a long sleep to replenish their spirit. Although Lin Yuan's body had completely recovered, the broken moon-white spirit qi clothes and the blood on them reminded Lin Yuan of how tragic everything he had experienced in the dimensional rift. The little rabbit also came back to her senses. Her lively eyes looked at Lin Yuan and seemed to heave a sigh of relief when she saw that Lin Yuan was fine. However, when she lowered her head and saw that there was only half a radish left in her hand, her ears drooped to the ground. The little rabbit rubbed the radish with heartache. Suddenly, the Moon Empress had broken off the radish and turned it into a whole radish. However, the newly grown radish looked 1 size smaller than before. The little rabbit subconsciously wanted to continue nibbling on the radish, but after seeing the smaller radish, she could not bear to eat it. Instead, she hid the radish behind her butt. Night Leaning Moon's eyes were on the other 2 people who had been spat out by the dimensional rift. After sizing up Zhou Luo and Lu Jie, Night Leaning Moon shifted her gaze to Lu Jie. If Lu Jie was just a Radiance 100 sequence member, as the chief guard of the spirit guards, Night Leaning Moon would not have such a deep impression of him. However, Night Leaning Moon was able to recognize Lu Jie with just a glance. Lu Jie was actually coming out of the evolving dimensional rift. Night Leaning Moon couldn't help but recall the time when Lu Jie had single-handedly blocked the swarm of insects outside of Cold Frost City, delaying the spirit guards for a full half an hour. Night Leaning Moon walked to Lu Jie's side and extended her hand to check his condition. She discovered that Lu Jie's current condition was abnormally good. The life energy within Lu Jie's body was in a state of excess. From time to time, Lu Jie's body would overflow with life energy. This was obviously the result of an overdose of treatment. However, when Night Leaning Moon looked at the insect queen beside Lu Jie, her eyebrows immediately twitched. She held the cocooned insect queen in her hand and muttered to herself. This insect queen actually absorbed the blade queen bee's life poison. What good fortune! However, the blade queen bee's venom in the insect queen's body is too little. It's not enough for the insect queen to mutate completely. Since that's the case, why don't I give you some good fortune? Just as Night Leaning Moon finished speaking, she was interrupted by the Moon Empress. Night Leaning Moon, this Empress has underestimated you. How can someone as stupid as you become a mid-class Class 4 creation master in 10 years? When Night Leaning Moon heard this, the corner of her mouth couldn't help but twitch twice behind the black gauze. How am I stupid? Back then, if I didn't have any talent as a creation master and was so diligent, I would at least be a pinnacle Class 4 Creation Master. I might even reach the standard of a Class 5 Creation Master. Even if my ability as a Creation Master is not at Class 5, I am still very strong. Why don't I see you praising me? When I was with you as a Radiance Envoy, I was always the team's main C position. Night Leaning Moon suddenly recalled that when she was with the Moon Empress as a Radiance Envoy, she seemed to be despised every day. Night Leaning Moon's mouth couldn't help but twitch even more. At that moment, Night Leaning Moon heard the Moon Empress speak again. The dimensional rift in this evolution is also at least Tier 5. It might even be higher. Now that the evolving dimensional rift has been stopped by the three of them, giving him a Blade Queen Bee isn't considered a good fortune. Night Leaning Moon looked at Lu Jie, who was lying on the ground, and pondered for a moment. She then said, I have not accepted a disciple for so many years. When he wakes up, if he is willing to acknowledge me as his master, I am willing to teach him with all my heart. The Moon Empress couldn't help but look a little surprised. Being accepted as a disciple by Night Leaning Moon, the chief guard of the spirit guards, was really considered a great fortune. Then the Moon Empress recalled that Lu Jie was her disciple, Lin Yuan's retainer knight. Wasn't Night Leaning Moon's wholehearted nurturing of Lu Jie the same as working for her disciple? That was really not bad. After Night Leaning Moon finished speaking, she looked at Zhou Luo and Lin Yuan, who was beside the Moon Empress, and then looked at the Moon Empress. Obviously, she had something to say. When the Moon Empress saw Night Leaning Moon's gaze, she said, Some people are destined to walk towards the mountains and seas. Some people are destined to walk towards the mountains and seas. Such people don't care about momentary glory. 3 years later will be the day to decide the 5 new Radiance Envoys. Speaking of this, a trace of reminiscence flashed in the Moon Empress' eyes. Then, the Moon Empress said softly, The enemy is in the dark while we are in the light. The enemy is in the dark while we are in the light. You can handle this matter as you see fit. After saying that, the Moon Empress bent down and carried Lin Yuan in her arms before walking out of the curtain formed by moonlight. After exiting the curtain formed by moonlight, the Moon Empress said to Mystic Moon, who was guarding outside, Mystic Moon, bring the 2 people inside to the Radiant Moon Palace and, after saying that, the Moon Empress paused and said again, Bring them back to Lin Yuan's mansion. Bring him back to Lin Yuan's manor and let him recuperate. Mystic Moon had already seen Lin Yuan in the Moon Empress' arms when she came out. Although Lin Yuan looked like he was in a state of deep sleep, just by looking at the Moon Empress' emotions, he knew that Lin Yuan was not in any danger. Furthermore, before the Moon Empress came out, Lin Yuan had been sleeping. After the layer of blood on the bright moon in the sky became extremely rich, it had already disappeared. The mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen also saw Lin Yuan in the Moon Empress' arms. The moment they saw Lin Yuan, the trio's tense heartstrings could finally relax a little. The Moon Empress ignored the mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen. He carried Lin Yuan and walked outside. When he walked outside, the Moon Empress's body immediately emitted dense moonlight, covering Lin Yuan's figure. The Moon Empress looked at Lin Yuan in her arms and said softly, Let's go home with Master. The moment the Moon Empress walked out, all the experts guarding outside lowered their heads. Even when they looked at the ground, their expressions were extremely respectful. However, just as the experts lowered their heads, they suddenly felt that the light shining on them was no longer cold. Instead, it had become warm. After a long while, the 2 guard envoys standing in front slowly raised their heads. Only then did he realize that the bright moon in the sky that reigned above everything had disappeared. The rising sun hung high in the sky, emitting warm light. The first update, asking for monthly votes, asking for a wave of subscriptions. End of chapter. Chapter 520. Lin Yuan fell into a deep sleep, but he seemed to have had a very, very long dream. In the dream, Lin Yuan was like a bystander watching a world. This world was originally full of vitality, and unknown flowers bloomed in the wilderness. However, at that moment, 2 rainbows emitting 7-colored lights suddenly appeared in the sky above the world. The two rainbows stood as equals, not giving way to each other as they dyed the blue sky. The rainbow light seemed gentle, but it was unusually rebellious. The rainbow light sprinkled over the earth, and the unknown flowers that bloomed on the earth cracked and withered under the rainbow light. At that moment, a figure suddenly descended from one of the rainbows. This figure was a young girl with her eyes closed, and her body was like a phantom. The young girl wore a crown on her forehead and a long dress, with a kind of innate nobility. The moment the young girl descended from the rainbow, it was as if she had vaguely invaded the entire world and was about to become the master of the world. At that moment, the other rainbow descended with a sword without a scabbard. The sword's hilt was gorgeous and carved with all kinds of alien beast totems. The slender sword body contained a touch of sharpness that could tear through everything. The sharp sword wrapped in sharpness and attacked the young girl wearing the crown. The two were in a tight stalemate. It was precisely this stalemate that made the rainbow light even more unscrupulous, causing the already disintegrating world to be about to completely collapse. Just as the world was about to collapse, the entire world was suddenly covered by a touch of reddish-gold brilliance. This touch of reddish-gold brilliance gave Lin Yuan, who was watching from the side, an unusually familiar and warm feeling. When this touch of reddish-gold brilliance descended, the young girl and the sharp sword that had been in a stalemate suddenly seemed to become unusually fearful. This touch of reddish-gold brilliance, which Lin Yuan was familiar with and warm, was like a cow that did not drink water, oppressing the young girl wearing the crown and the sharp sword without a scabbard. In the end, the young girl wearing the crown reluctantly walked toward the sharp sword without a scabbard. The young girl opened her arms and embraced the sharp sword without a scabbard. At this moment, the two of them combined into one, forming a new whole from the original combination of two single entities. In midair of the world that was about to collapse, the young girl wearing the crown curled up her legs, and her skirt fluttered. She tightly hugged the sword with an unusually gorgeous hilt. The gorgeous patterns on the sword seemed to have become the young girl's authority. With the power of the heavenly Tao on him, he wanted to reach the heavens. At this moment, the two rainbows in the sky that were originally not giving way to each other also merged into one. The originally unruly rainbow light also became beautiful and gentle, and the rainbow light once again shone upon the world. This time, the rainbow light did not destroy the world that was on the verge of shattering. Instead, it blended perfectly into the world. As for the girl holding the sharp sword, after the rainbow light completely fused with the world, she submitted to the shattered world and became a part of it. Or rather, he was like a guardian, protecting this world that was on the verge of shattering. He watched everything that happened in this world like a bystander. At that moment, Lin Yuan seemed to suddenly smell the aroma of radishes. Then, in the world that was on the verge of shattering, the cracked and dry land was covered with endless radishes. The radishes grew, blossomed, bore seeds, grew old and rotted. Batch after batch of radishes continued to provide energy to this world that was on the verge of collapse. Slowly, the broken soil became fertile again, and unknown wildflowers bloomed all over the land. Meanwhile, the hero of this world, Radish, who had cured this world that was on the verge of shattering, had disappeared. However, this world was still filled with the aroma of carrots. Lin Yuan witnessed this strange scene in his dream. Moon Empress, you don't have to beat so many jujubes, right? Even if you calculate that young lord should wake up in a while, young lord can't eat so many jujubes. Cold Moon watched as the Moon Empress kept taking out the pits of the diamond smooth crystal thread jujubes from the date garden in the inner palace. Then, she used a pestle made of completely jade-textured osmanthus wood to continuously smash the diamond smooth crystal thread jujubes. Cold Moon felt that it was simply too exaggerated. The Moon Empress had probably plucked all the jujubes from the only 3 diamond smooth crystal thread jujubes in the Leaning Moon Mountain's date garden. Cold Moon knew that the Moon Empress was exceptionally fond of Lin Yuan. But now, it seemed that she was a little better than before. It was reasonable to say that after the lotus phase in the lotus pond reached suzerain, the multicolored light that they spewed could completely cover the entire inner palace. But now, it only covered a 5-meter range of the lotus pond. God knew how many times the lotus roots of the suzerain lotus phase had been cut by the Moon Empress. The Moon Empress was a little anxious as she peeled the jujubes in her hand. When she heard that Cold Moon still had time to talk, she quickly said, "Cold Moon, come and help this Empress grind these jujubes. Cold Moon, come and help me grind these dates. My disciple's hands were seriously injured when he came out of the dimensional rift. How can he not take nourishment? This Empress intends to make these jujubes into jujube powder. Even if this Empress disciple drinks it every day, it should be enough for 3 months." Cold Moon couldn't help but hold her forehead. How long had it been since she left the Radiant Moon Palace? Why did the Moon Empress seem to have changed? If young Lord drank the diamond smooth crystal thread jujube powder every day, in less than a week, he would probably become a human-shaped blood sprinkler. He would be able to use his nosebleed to water the flowers and plants on the leaning Moon Mountain. Moreover, didn't the Moon Empress already let young Lord eat half of the Rabbit Emperor's sacred source life form? Even if young Lord is a smooth crystal thread jujube, after being made into jujube cheese and jujube powder, he should be in the healthiest state. At this point, Songyu stole a glance at the small flower pot containing the crystal soil. The listless Lord Rabbit Emperor was currently using his ears to plant the carrots in the crystal sand. Cold Moon felt that the Moon Empress' love for the young lord was simply terrifying. However, when she thought about her gains in Redbud City after leaving the Radiant Moon Palace, she couldn't help but smile faintly. When the Moon Empress saw Songyu's smile, she stopped what she was doing and looked at Songyu suspiciously. 10 years have passed. Is there someone chasing you again? The Moon Empress suddenly recalled that Marquis Jingshi had openly expressed his love for Songyu. Both of his legs were broken by Songyue, and he sat in a wheelchair for 10 years without daring to get up. Although Marquis Jingshi's way of expressing his love was a little overboard, Songyu's actions were not befitting of a woman. When Cold Moon heard the Moon Empress' words, she was stunned. Immediately after, Cold Moon knew that the Moon Empress had misunderstood her. Songyu glanced at the room in the back of the palace and said, "Moon Empress, young lord's younger sister, Chu Si, is now my disciple." Yesterday's second update. There's a change in Button's work. Something happened, and we encountered some problems. Boo-hoo. There are 2 updates today. They are, I can't draw you with a brush, and unparalleled in the world. I'll make up for it tomorrow. Hee hee, love you guys. End of this chapter. Chapter 521. Upon hearing that, the Moon Empress was stunned, but she didn't look particularly surprised. During the week that Lin Yuan had been asleep, the Moon Empress had long seen how close Cold Moon was to Chu Si. It was just that the Moon Empress didn't expect that Cold Moon, who had always been cold, would actually take the initiative to accept a disciple. With just this thought, the Moon Empress was certain that Cold Moon had the intention of accepting a disciple. She must have seen the Moon Empress accept Lin Yuan as her disciple and learned from her. Since Songyu was learning from her, the Moon Empress felt that she had to teach Songyu how to be a good master. From the Moon Empress' point of view, a master that didn't pamper his disciple wasn't a good master. Songyu, smile in front of Chu Si more often in the future. It's not good to be too serious. At this point, the Moon Empress muttered to herself for a moment before changing the topic. You've just taken Chu Si as your disciple. Why don't you find a path protector for her? That way, her safety can be guaranteed. When the Moon Empress said this, she looked very serious. After all, due to Lin Yuan's incident, the Moon Empress had been frightened for a while. Upon hearing the Moon Empress' words, Songyu hurriedly replied, "Moon Empress, I see that Chu Si is getting along well with my iced Songhuang dragon. I plan to let the iced Songhuang dragon become Chu Si's path protector." When the Moon Empress heard that, she felt that Cold Moon could finish her apprenticeship. All of a sudden, the Moon Empress looked at the little rabbit, who was lying on the table and looking pitifully at the carrot growing in the soil. The little rabbit sensed someone's gaze on her and immediately pricked up her ears in alarm. Seeing that the Moon Empress was looking at her, the little rabbit quickly turned around and stood up to block the flower pot that she had planted her carrots in. The Moon Empress helplessly shifted her gaze. This rabbit had practically fallen into the radish's eyes. At this moment, a clear voice came from the entrance of the rear hall. Moon Empress, His Highness Path Protector, the Mother of Bloodbath, requests an audience. Upon hearing that, the Moon Empress turned her head and glanced at the room in the inner palace. Let her in. After speaking, the Moon Empress placed a smooth crystal silk jujube that had just been pitted on the table. Cold Moon keenly noticed that the Moon Empress' expression had sunk. Then, Song-yu saw a red-haired, red-eyed woman dressed in red leather armor walk in from the entrance of the rear hall. When she saw the red-haired, red-eyed woman, Song-yu's entire body emitted a terrifying pressure. Under Song-yu's guidance, this terrifying pressure did not affect even the grass and trees in the rear hall. However, when this pressure fell on the Mother of Bloodbath, it felt as if it was trapped in a glacier. The Mother of Bloodbath gritted its teeth and walked toward the Moon Empress step by step, withstanding the pressure. At this moment, Song-yu's cold voice sounded. You're at the middle stage of Myth 2. You've improved quite a lot since the last time I saw you, but your wariness is too weak. The Mother of Bloodbath had been very worried for the past few days, even though it knew that Lin Yuan should be fine. However, the Mother of Bloodbath still did not know what was going on with Lin Yuan and felt uneasy. Compared to the Moon Empress, the Mother of Bloodbath might not necessarily be the most worried when Lin Yuan was suddenly swallowed into the dimensional entrance that was undergoing evolution. However, as Lin Yuan's path protector, the Mother of Bloodbath undoubtedly blamed itself the most. After seeing that Lu Jie and Zhou Luo were fine in the manner, the Mother of Bloodbath transformed into a fist-sized spider like before and landed on the roof beam. It just looked in the direction of the leaning moon mountain. Even after Lu Jie woke up and cooked, the Mother of Bloodbath did not eat a single bite. The Mother of Bloodbath looked at the Moon Empress, who had once saved it, and felt increasingly ashamed. Just as Chu Xinyue had said, it had not been by Lin Yuan's side to protect his safety. Not only had it let down Lin Yuan's trust, but it had also let down the Moon Empress' trust. Even though the Mother of Bloodbath was standing in front of the Moon Empress, it did not know how to speak. However, the Mother of Bloodbath only remained silent for 2 seconds before breaking the silence and asking softly, "Moon Empress, how is Lin Yuan now?" The Moon Empress was originally angry, but after seeing the Mother of Bloodbath's expression, she sighed and said, "Lin Yuan is no longer in any danger. Lin Yuan is no longer in any danger. He just needs to wake up to recover completely." Based on the Moon Empress' previous temper, the Mother of Bloodbath would have sublimated into nothingness under the moonlight when the Moon Empress arrived. It could be said that the Mother of Bloodbath had not protected Lin Yuan because it had completely lost its vigilance. Otherwise, given the Mother of Bloodbath's Myth 2 strength, it would not have let Lin Yuan be sucked into the dimensional rift that had suddenly opened. However, the Moon Empress now knew that she could not do anything to the Mother of Bloodbath. When the Moon Empress had helped Lin Yuan choose his path protector, she had helped him establish a relationship. It was not like giving Lin Yuan an item like the Extreme Token. The Extreme Token had been used, and the Moon Empress could recharge it and seal it with another Moonlight domain. Even if a source-type item like the Extreme Token was damaged, the Moon Empress could spend some effort to find a replacement. Lin Yuan was the Moon Empress' disciple, so she naturally understood his temperament. Lin Yuan and the Mother of Bloodbath already had a deep relationship due to the bond of being a path protector. Thus, the Moon Empress, who had never sighed even in the face of difficult problems, sighed for the first time when facing the Mother of Bloodbath. The Moon Empress waved her hand, and a brown stream of light flew toward the Mother of Bloodbath. The Mother of Bloodbath hurriedly grabbed the flying brown stream of light and found that it was an ancient wooden token with a crescent moon engraved in the center. The surface of the wooden token faintly carried a moonlight-like halo, making the crescent moon engraved on it look a little hazy. The Mother of Bloodbath held the flying wooden token in puzzlement. At that moment, the Mother of Bloodbath heard the Moon Empress say, "I chose you to be Lin Yuan's path protector because your exclusive skills and abilities can allow you to quickly improve your strength. That's why I valued you." Upon hearing the Moon Empress' words, The mother of Bloodbath hurriedly replied, I have let down the Moon Empress trust. I have let down the Moon Empress trust. The mother of Bloodbath's words were very calm and at the same time, indescribable determination. It was as though after experiencing a mistake, the mistake itself had been engraved in its life. The Moon Empress looked straight at the mother of Bloodbath and said in a cold voice, You have nothing to disappoint me. You have nothing to disappoint me. I only hope that you won't betray Lin Yuan's trust in the future. When you became Lin Yuan's path protector, you have already repaid the favor you owed me. When the mother of Bloodbath heard the Moon Empress words, it suddenly recalled Lin Yuan's firm eyes in the rain when it had advanced to Myth 2. It also recalled the bits and pieces of time it had spent with Lin Yuan. First update, seeking monthly votes. Recently, I have encountered some matters and have been updating late. End of this chapter. That you're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.